We'll call the ZBA meeting of November the 10th to order at 1:15 p.m. I do have some legal things we need to read just before we do start. Pursuant to Section 70 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act, the October 16th gubernatorial disaster proclamation and written determination of the Zoning Board of Appeals chair, a public meeting can be held by audio or video conference without a physical quorum. Due to public health concerns, this hearing is being conducted by audio-video conference. Please note this hearing may be continued and without further notice on the motion of the Zoning Board of Appeals. All interested persons who are in attendance today will be given the opportunity to be heard. This hearing is being recorded and live streamed at lakecountyil.gov/watch ZBA to allow members of the public the ability to watch the hearing. In-person attendance was also made available to the public on the second floor conference room at 500 West Winchester Road, Libertyville, Illinois, and is limited to the number of persons practicable in keeping with social distancing requirements. I'd ask for a roll call. Is Brad going to do that, or Krista, are you doing that?
I'm here.
Okay. Hey, Brad, roll call, please.
Member Hockney. I saw Member Hockney on this screen. Is he present?
Everyone should be here, but remember, ZBA, I've muted you, so please unmute yourself to say present. Thank you.
Present. Thank you. Member Peterson.
Present.
Member Raymond.
Present.
Member Reindl. I know Member Reindl is in the building.
John, if you can hear me, you can press the space bar to temporarily unmute yourself. I'm going to run over there. Why don't you go to the next person?
Okay. Member Roche. I think it's Member Roche.
Jeez,
Sorry,
Maggie, you're on mute. There you go.
Thank you. Member Starkey.
Present.
Chairman Kaplan.
Here.
And one more time for Member Reindl.
No,
There he is.
in attendance. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a full board of 7 members present.
Thank you, Brad. A quorum is present. As a reminder to board members, if you are able to share your video, please ensure your camera is on when you're speaking and when voting. If you wish to speak, please raise your virtual hand. And if you are calling in with your phone, press *9 to raise your hand. After your name has been called to speak, followed by a short delay, you will be unmuted. If board members, as well as members of the public and county staff, could please keep themselves muted for the duration of the hearing unless speaking, it'll help prevent any undue interruption and noise during the hearing. We will dispense with the pledge since we do not have a flag. Purpose of this hearing today is ZBA case 584-2020, a petition of Atkinson North Chicago LLC, record owner and principal requesting a conditional use permit to allow a private heliport, also acting as AbbVie Aviation LLC. What we will do first is staff is going to make a presentation about what the hearing is entailing today. The petitioner and their representatives will then have an opportunity to go ahead and make their comments and explain to us what they asked for. The board will then ask questions of the petitioner if there are any. The public will then have the ability to ask questions. And then after that, we will invite public statements. And we'll go through that as we go through the process as well, but that's just a brief rundown. Please note, select items from the application as well as any additional evidence to be provided by the applicant and members of the public ahead of the hearing may be presented via screen share during the course of the hearing. Physical evidence germane to topics of today's agenda have been previously submitted. However, if there are additional items the petitioner or members of the public desires to submit to the record, please indicate by raising your virtual hand and staff will coordinate with you on how to send an email containing the materials prior to the close of the hearing. We did have several individuals that reached out ahead of time that would like to make some comments. There may be some additional ones. So Krista, if I missed anybody, let me know. Kevin Considine from Lake County Partners, Seamus Collins from Lake Forest Hospital, Deb Wazak from City of North Chicago, Anthony Vega from the Lake County Sheriff's Office, and Lisa Spano, a resident. Krista, were there any others that submitted that they wanted to speak today?
Yes, we also received a submittal from Dino Ferretti. And just to clarify, those were the people that we received requests to speak. So we did also receive written comments, and those will be read later, just to clarify.
Sounds good. We'll add Dino to speaking as well. At this time, anyone that is going to make a presentation, ask a question in favor of or against, if you'd raise your right hand, since this is sworn testimony, if you'd raise your right hand, you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
I do. Thank you. As part of the hearing agenda, public comment was invited through email or voicemail up until the beginning of the hearing. Comments that have been received before 1 p.m. today may be read during consideration of that item. Comments received during the hearing, but after the applicable agenda item is heard, will be held until the end of the hearing. If there are members of the public who desire to speak on today's agenda, please indicate by raising your virtual hand and staff will call on you at the appropriate time. Questions or comments from the public will be heard after the presentation of evidence by the petitioner or their representative, and after members of the ZBA have had a chance to ask their questions. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes, and that's both verbal and written that Krista will incorporate into the hearing later on as well. At this time, and we'll go over the raising of the hand as we get that to the public. We definitely want input from the public on this. So as we go through this, just be patient. I know AbbVie has somewhat of a lengthy presentation they'll probably be making, but we will review how you can submit your questions and comments at that time too. So just bear with us. We want to hear from you. At this time, I'll ask staff to give the staff.
Chairman.
Yes, go ahead, John.
With all due respect, if I may, tomorrow, Wednesday, is the start of Veterans Day, and I would appreciate it if we all could take a moment to honor our servicemen and women. In as much I don't believe we're going to meet again in the reliable time.
Absolutely. Good comments and very appropriate. So at this time, if we'd have a moment of silence to reflect on Veterans Day tomorrow. Great. Thank you, Member Rindle. Appreciate that. At this time, I'll turn it over to staff for the staff presentation on our hearing today.
Okay. Before we do that, Hannah, did you have any comments briefly just from the technical side that you wanted to go over?
Yes, just briefly, I do see a chat as well, so I hope this addresses your question for anyone who wishes to speak. So first, I'll introduce myself. My name is Hannah Mulroy. I'm a senior planner with Lake County Planning, Building, and Development. I, along with Alex Carr from our communications division, will be acting as what we're calling designated technical officers for the Lake County side of things today. So he and I will be calling and making sure that the chair or Krista's project manager knows who wants to speak and who has raised their hands. There are a couple of different ways to let us know that you would like to speak. So as Chair Cap had mentioned, there is an option to raise your digital hand or virtual hand. What you'll do is you'll go to the bottom, if you're on a computer or an app, not on your phone. If you hover over the bottom of your screen, you'll see a participants tab. If you are button or whatever widget, if you click that, it will open a list of the participants on the right side of the screen. Typically on the bottom, you'll see something that says raise hand. That is your virtual hand you can raise. We'll be keeping an eye out for that. We will call on or we'll acknowledge it. We'll let the chair or Krista know that you have a question or a comment, and we'll call on you at the appropriate time. If you are on your phone, you can press *9 to raise or unraise, raise or unraise your hand. I can also put your hand down for you. And if you're called on to speak, you can press *9 to mute or unmute. As Chair Cabin mentioned, there is a time for public comments and questions that will be designated. I will make a list of anybody who's raised their hand or indicated in the chat box that they would like to speak. So when that time comes, I will let the chair know who has all said they would like to speak during the course of the hearing. The last thing we do ask is that we do keep the comments in the chat box to a minimum. It's okay to say you would like to speak or raise your hand and I will acknowledge it. But as this hearing is subject to be recorded by a court reporter who is on the line, she is not going to be able to capture anything that is not verbal testimony. So we do ask that you keep your chat commentary to a limited to just technical issues mostly. I think with that, if there's no tech questions, I'm going to hand it over to Krista for the staff presentation.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. Good afternoon. This is Krista Brown. I am the Planning and Zoning Manager. Under consideration today by the Zoning Board of Appeals is application number 000584-2020, which is a request for a conditional use permit for a private heliport. The Zoning Board of Appeals has been delegated the final decision authority over this conditional use permit. When a conditional use permit, or CUP, is required for a particular use, it means that the use is generally appropriate in that zoning district. However, there may be some characteristics that deserve special examination. As part of their decision authority, the zoning board can deny the application, approve the application without conditions, or approve the application subject to conditions that in their opinion will mitigate any adverse impacts of the proposed use. The zoning board's decision on this delegated CUP will be based on the approval criteria in section 151.050F3 of the Lake County Code, and which are addressed in the staff report the board has received. The applicants and others with an interest in this request should be aware that if the Zoning Board of Appeals does not reach a decision today, this hearing will be continued to another date and time that will be announced before the board adjourns. Interested parties should be prepared to participate in additional meetings if they are needed. The board may require conditions. Discussion of possible conditions to mitigate impacts to nearby properties will take place before the board closes testimony. The applicants and members of the public may make suggestions to the board regarding appropriate conditions. If a continuation is necessary, final consideration of conditions will take place at the continued hearing. At the conclusion of the hearing, the ZBA must make a finding of fact identifying its reasons for granting or denying the CUP. I have correspondence from Eric Wagner, the Director of Planning, Building, and Development, which was sent to the ZBA and to staff on October 23rd, 2020, and I will now read that for the record. Dear Chair Kaplan and ZBA members, in advance of the upcoming hearing for ZBA case number CUP-00584-2020, I would like to inform you that I have recused myself from any and all involvement in the ZBA case, including the formal application review process, any consultation with staff, engagement with the public or others, discussion with the ZBA, and participation in the upcoming hearing itself. The reason for my decision is as follows. When I first became aware of the proposal in 2019, prior to the applicant's formal submission of an application, I promptly consulted the state's attorney's office, given my wife's status as an employee of Abbott Laboratories, and whose company is an indirect party to the project that is subject of the ZBA case. Although in consultation with the state's attorney's office, I concluded that my involvement in the ZBA case would not present a direct conflict of interest, out of an abundance of caution, I determined that the most appropriate course of action would be to recuse myself entirely from the matter to remove the potential appearance of conflict. Consequently, following my discussion with the state's attorney's office, I instructed staff to firewall me from any knowledge and involvement in the case and any communications about the case. I further instructed staff to inform me of the status of the case only if and when it moved forward to the application stage so that I could provide the ZBA written notice of my recusal in advance of the hearing. Staff has now done so. If I do happen to receive any communications from the public or others on this topic prior to the hearing, I will immediately refer them to staff without further engagement to ensure that I remain completely uninvolved in the case. I would respectfully request that my statement of recusal be entered into the hearing record for ZBA case CUP 00584-2020. Thank you for your understanding. Regards, Eric Wagner. Staff has received written correspondence from several residents in advance of today's hearing. These comments have been forwarded to the ZBA members for their review and consideration and will be read into the record during the public comment portion of the hearing. We also have received some voicemails, and these recordings will be aired. Staff has also received requests to make public comment during today's hearing. Additionally, if there are persons in attendance today that would like to speak, please indicate by using the digital raise hand feature or type your request in the chat box, as Hannah indicated earlier. Staff will call your name at the appropriate time during the hearing. Once your name is called, you must identify yourself for the public record and then address the remarks to the ZBA, the applicant, or Lake County staff. Please speak clearly and try to limit remarks directly to the matter under discussion. The comments will be taken in the order the request was received. Please be advised the initial public participation is limited to questions of the applicant, ZBA, and staff. Any comments for or against will be made after the initial testimony. Additionally, there will be an opportunity before the close of testimony for any final comments. The applicant is Atkinson North LLC, record owner and principal of the subject property. AbbVie Aviation LLC is acting as a representative of the record owner and principal, and they will also be developing and operating the heliport, if approved. The property subject to today's request is zoned limited industrial, LI for short, and consists of approximately 10 acres. The property address is 13394 West Atkinson Road, Libertyville, Illinois, and identified by PIN 1113400023. I would like to make a clarifying statement regarding the number of flights or operations that are proposed with this application. So an operation is defined as either one landing or one takeoff. So if the helicopter lands at the airport, drops off a passenger, and then takes off, that is reported as 2 operations, even though it is one flight. The total maximum number of operations proposed by the applicant is 4 operations or 2 flights on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, and 6 operations or 3 flights on Thursday and Friday. So that equates to 12 flights per week or 24 total operations. The legal notice for this application was published in the Daily Herald on October 22nd, 2020. Correspondence has been received from the Lake County Departments of Planning, Divisions of Building and Engineering, and the Lake County Environmental Health and Public Works Departments. We also received correspondence from the Lake McHenry County Soil and Water Conservation District and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. For the record, the original application is on file in the Zoning Board of Appeals office, and a copy of the application and deed was provided to ZBA board members prior to the hearing and made available for public view on the county website under the ZBA agenda for this hearing. Russell Garrett will present the petition for the applicants, and I will now turn it over to Mr. Garrett.
Sounds good. Thank you, Krista. Any questions of the board before we have Mr. Garrett begin his presentation? Seeing none, Mr. Garrett,
None.
welcome, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
All right, thank you. Good day, Mr. Chairman and members of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Thank you for arranging this hearing. As I said, my name is Russell Garrick. I'm the Vice President of Central Services and Manager of AbbVie Aviation for AbbVie. AbbVie Aviation, a wholly owned subsidiary of AbbVie Inc. We greatly appreciate your consideration for our application for this conditional use permit for AbbVie Aviation to develop, build, and operate a helipad that will support our growing business needs. AbbVie Aviation is the designated representative for this application and land lessee with the exclusive rights to develop this land. If our conditional use permit is approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals, AbbVie Aviation will develop the helipad for use by AbbVie Inc. To begin, I'd like to provide a summary of what I will provide in my remarks. I will cover 5 main areas. These areas include an introduction to AbbVie and our commitment to our community, a review of our site plan, our business rationale for the helipad, aircraft safety, and finally, an introduction to our experts who have joined me here today. We'll have a few brief slides for our presentation. If we could please advance to slide number 2.
Just give me one moment to launch it.
Thank you. First, I'd like to provide an overview of our business and the work we do right here every day to improve the lives of patients around the world. AbbVie is proudly the largest employer in Lake County and a community leader. We are a global research-based biopharmaceutical company headquartered in Lake County with more than 14,000 employees and contractors working in our facilities here in Lake County and more than 47,000 employees around the world. Our products impact the lives of over 52 million patients around the world. With more than 1.1 million square feet of research and development space in Illinois, we strive to develop innovative therapies for some of the world's most complex and critical conditions in the therapeutic areas of immunology, virology, neuroscience, medical aesthetics, eye care, gastrointestinal, and women's health. AbbVie takes our responsibility to this community very seriously. Since becoming a company in 2013, AbbVie has supported the community in the following ways. AbbVie has provided $20 million in philanthropic support to Lake County. Our charitable contributions have helped transform local education by renovating libraries and libraries and learning spaces and funding curriculum, literacy, and teacher development programs. We've committed over $40 million to build a middle school in North Chicago to provide a safer, state-of-the-art school for those students. Our resources have enabled area food banks, shelters, and social service organizations to serve more of our neighbors. And our employees are also deeply invested in giving back to this community, having volunteered more than 80,000 service hours to children and families here. In addition to personal protective equipment, donations locally to support the response and needs of our first responders during this pandemic, AbbVie has done the following. AbbVie used its vast network of research labs to produce and donate almost 500,000 viral transport media samples required for COVID-19 testing to the Illinois Department of Public Health. We are also the sole funder of a mobile field hospital that has expanded capacity at Vista East Medical Center in Waukegan to test and treat patients. Finally, we converted additional lab space here in Lake County to run COVID-19 tests for the state of Illinois and Lake County Health Department, a partnership that continues today. If we could please go ahead and advance to slide 3. Secondly, I'll now discuss our site location for the proposed helipad. AbbVie extensively considered alternative locations and determined the location in our application to be both the safest and most effective option. This location shown on the slide is an open farm field on Atkinson Road, just south of our corporate headquarters. We specifically chose this site over several others we surveyed throughout the surrounding area in Lake County for several important reasons. First and foremost, the openness of this land with clear visibility and safe flight pathways that avoid residential areas is an important factor for choosing this site. In our meeting with the Federal Aviation Administration and Illinois Department of Transportation, both agreed we could not have chosen a safer property that will have minimal impacts to surrounding neighbors. Secondly, we chose this site due to its proximity to Libertyville Fire Station number 3, which allows for 24/7 emergency personnel services access to this site. We believe this is a valuable community benefit. Thirdly, we specifically chose this land over other green space in Abbott Park to safely avoid congested areas. Each day there are nearly 10,000 employees and contractors in Abbott Park daily. This heavy auto and foot traffic makes this space less than ideal. Along those lines, we also did not choose land north of Buckley Road or Highway 137 due to how congested that roadway is and the dense trees and forestation on that property. Finally, this site has key infrastructure needed to support a helipad, such as fiber optic cable and necessary utilities. Our site selection decision was one we weighed very seriously as we carefully reviewed all suitable options. We are confident this is the most ideal site for use, as well as the safest with the least impact to the surrounding areas. AbbVie has reviewed this location with the Illinois Department of Transportation, the Federal Aviation Administration, emergency first responders, and our aviation consultants who are experts in their respective fields. All of these entities believe this is an ideal setting and location for the proposed helipad based on safety and ability to minimize impact to neighboring areas. This land is currently zoned as limited industrial, and development of a heliport on limited industrial land is a permitted use, consistent with the Lake County Code Use Table. Therefore, we are not seeking to rezone this land. This land is planned to remain as industrial in the county's future land use. The site will consist of a concrete helipad, a small building structure intended to house mechanical systems, parking for vehicles, and restrooms. The helipad and small structure will be over 500 feet from Atkinson Road. The site will be fenced and secured. This slide shows a rendering of the small building from the vantage of Atkinson Road. This heliport will not serve as a hangar. Aircraft inspection, storage, and maintenance, including refueling, will occur at our corporate hangar at Waukegan National Airport. If you could please advance to slide 4. The layout of the site is designed to avoid any impact to area wetlands. The roadway, access gate, parking lot, and walkway lighting are designed to be compliant with Lake County night sky development ordinances and lighting levels. They are positioned to provide the lighting only where needed. The helipad lighting conforms to Federal Aviation Administration lighting and navigational lighting criteria. The 10-acre site has only 0.9 acres of building, helipad, and roadways. The balance of the site is predominantly vegetated with grasses and native selective planting based on Lake County planning criteria. The roadway, support building, and helipad siting, as well as landscape configuration, were selected to minimize impact on the adjacent wetlands and support helicopter operational safety, as visible in this aerial shot of the proposed site plan. While the helipad will be registered as private, AbbVie Aviation desires to allow use of the helipad for the broader community benefit. Therefore, AbbVie Aviation will allow emergency service organizations use and access to the helipad in cases of public emergency. In our meeting with Lake County Emergency Management Agency, we learned that the county agency does not currently include aviation as part of its emergency planning. Upon completion of the helipad site, estimated to be summer 2021, we encourage the agency to account for the helipad as part of the master county emergency planning and aviation capabilities throughout the county in general. AbbVie also met with Lake County Sheriff John Eidelberg and Deputy Sheriff Anthony Vega to discuss the helipad use by emergency service personnel, and the office is supportive of the helipad use by the county emergency service agencies. Considering the near proximity of Libertyville Fire Station number 3 and North Chicago Fire Station number 2 and Northwestern Medicine Lake Forest Hospital, we engaged each entity to determine how the helipad could enhance their operations, and ultimately they were all supportive. Specifically, we met with Libertyville Fire Chief Richard Karani to discuss the site plan and usage, including any considerations the fire station has for fencing materials or design as they are neighboring properties. He expressed support for gated control for Fire Station number 3 for emergency services seeking access to the site. AbbVie also met with North Chicago officials, given the close proximity to North Chicago Fire Station number 2. Mayor Leon Rockingham Jr., Police Chief Lazaro Perez, and Fire Chief Del Urban are supportive of the helipad site and access for use by emergency services. As Atkinson Road is under North Chicago jurisdiction, the city also agreed to work with AbbVie for necessary permits for road access. If you could please go to slide 5. Thirdly, I'll discuss our business rationale. The competitive nature of drug discovery and development in the biopharmaceutical industry and the size of AbbVie's footprint in Lake County and across the region, including operations, facilities, employees, and pharmaceutical supply chain partners, require us to adapt to meet the competitive nature of the industry and continue the high level of performance that delivers results for patients worldwide and paves the way for future growth. As a result of our recently completed large acquisition of Allergan, AbbVie's global and domestic footprint have expanded, and our supply chain needs have increased and become more complex. Therefore, to continue to position AbbVie as a leading employer in Lake County and a growing Fortune 100 company, we determined it is necessary to expand our corporate aviation fleet beyond fixed-wing aircraft to include a helicopter and a small helipad in the vicinity of our corporate headquarters. Let me elaborate on some key points regarding our rationale. First, a helicopter will ensure AbbVie remains competitive. Helicopters are an efficient means of travel and regularly used amongst industry peers, including Johnson & Johnson, Merck, and Pfizer. This type of travel is necessary for greater flexibility, especially when traveling within a 400-mile radius of headquarters, and will assist in our business growth. Second, helicopter travel will facilitate greater access to our pharmaceutical supply chain vendors and ensure we maintain a stable supply chain to support our global business objectives. As a result of our recent integration, we now manage a more diverse portfolio of medicines, each with their own unique challenges, from packaging components to raw materials to training material for sales reps. Throughout this state alone, we contract with nearly 2,000 unique vendors that play critical roles to our supply chain in support of our mission. We all witness how interruptions in the supply chain can be devastating through this pandemic. Additional travel options allow us to optimize our business demands, respond to emerging needs, and ultimately protect our pharmaceutical supply chain. Finally, a helicopter provides our key personnel more agile access to our facilities. Within the flight region, we have important manufacturing sites in Cincinnati, Ohio, and Wyandotte, Michigan. AbbVie has carefully considered its business needs while being mindful of our neighbors. To ensure we considered our neighbors, we reached out to Knollwood neighbors as well as other local businesses, association groups such as Lake County Partners, and County Board Chair Sandy Hart and members Ann Main and Mike Rummel to inform each of them of the project. If you could please go to slide number 6. My fourth point is that AbbVie Aviation has an excellent safety record and selected an aircraft with safety as the main priority. The team has received both International Standard for Business Aviation Operations and Business Aviation Safety Consortium accreditations, which are the gold standard in the aviation industry, demonstrating our commitment to ensuring best practices and safety at the highest levels. Further, all of AbbVie Aviation management achieved the highest level of National Business Aviation Association management certification. All AbbVie Aviation pilots trained to exceed Federal Aviation Administration requirements and train in the highest level simulators every 6 months. The final area I'd like to discuss is that AbbVie closely engaged with Lake County Planning, Building and Development early and regularly throughout the process to ensure we complied with all local zoning requirements. Specifically, we work with our project manager, Krista Brown, at the department to incorporate all feedback provided by the county during formal site plan review. And on September 25th, received conditional approval of our site capacity and site plan review. We appreciate the professionalism, leadership, and guidance Krista and her team have provided to us throughout this process. We believe AbbVie Aviation meets all approval criteria in the Lake County Code regarding helipads. AbbVie's application for conditional use permit and related technical drawings have been on file with the Zoning Board of Appeals. They were prepared under my direction and supervision, and the consulting experts who contributed to the application and drawings are present and available for questions. We ask that the application and technical drawings be accepted as evidence into the record of this hearing. Please go to slide number 7. We have with us today several of the field experts in aviation and site planning that AbbVie Aviation has been working with since commissioning the helipad project. These experts and I welcome any questions members of the committee or public may have. Specifically have with us today AbbVie Aviation Director of Corporate Aviation, Pilot Kirk Mees. Site development was conducted by Mead and Hunt. Here today is Richard Lundeen. The noise and air quality study was also conducted by Mead and Hunt. With us today is Stephanie Ward. Wetland study was conducted by Bollinger Environmental. With us today is Paul Bollinger. Aviation consulting was provided by Rick Fiddler Aviation Consultants. Here today is Rick Fiddler. Legal zoning council guidance was provided by O'Donnell Callahan LLC. With us today is Gerald Callahan. We hope you approve our conditional use permit application and continue to support AbbVie's business growth right here in Lake County. AbbVie Aviation believes the conditions recommended by Lake County staff are appropriate and will fully abide by the conditions if imposed by the Zoning Board of Appeals. Thank you for your time and careful consideration of our application. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you very much for the presentation, and we will enter those exhibits as part of the record today per your request. Staff will enter those at this time. We'll start with the board members to see if they have specific questions of the presentation or any of the experts that are here with us. We'll start with Member Hockney. You can go ahead if you've got questions. Remember to unmute yourself, board members. After this, to the public, as a reminder, we will open it up to questions from the public after this, and then statements will be later on. But right now it's ZBA board members, and Member Hockney, if you've got any questions, go ahead.
I do have a couple. In the written material, I didn't hear you say anything about this. I understand that the flight path is generally going to be over I-94. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then the second question was asked actually by one of the residents. I didn't know the answer. Why not use the Waukegan Airport as opposed to building a new heliport?
Yeah, I think clearly from an AbbVie perspective, we've made a commitment to say, how can we leverage our supply chain? How do we ensure that supply chain integrity going forward? Having optimal flexibility by having control of our own helipad adjacent to our corporate headquarters is more advantageous than just using the Waukegan National Airport. We can't control flights in and out of Waukegan National Airport. Those are regulated. We can't control with our own schedules and timing of the helipad. I think we acknowledge there's an element of convenience and clearly agility and convenience for what we do for our supply chain challenges, our manufacturing challenges, or any other business needs, are the preference to have that adjacent to our corporate headquarters.
You touched on some of the environmental concerns. I understand the property is about 10 acres and you're only going to use about 1 acre. 9 acres will be left in the open space. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's a 10-acre parcel, and we'll only have about 0.9 acres of the helipad, roadways, and building structure. The rest will be in the native plantings, as I made in my opening remarks.
That's all I have for now.
Sounds good. Thanks, Denny. Member Peterson.
Good afternoon, and thank you for your synopsis this afternoon and the thorough booklet that you provided to the ZBA. I have a question with regard to the lights. I know in the evening that the lights will not be on, that they'll be turned on by the pilot in the helicopter. And it does appear that it is a state-of-the-art helicopter. Nonetheless, what happens if the pilot cannot turn on the lights from the helicopter?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Let me maybe pose it in two different ways. I'm going to ask Richard Lundeen first from Mead and Hunt to talk about just the lighting in general, and then I think we'll ask Kirk to come back and discuss the question on safety with lighting. So Richard, why don't you please just
Okay.
overview of the lighting.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. The overall lighting design for the site is really into two components. One is the site lighting for the roadway, the access point at the gate, and for the parking. And the second lighting is actually of the helipad and the navigation lighting. The navigation lighting is really going to be green points of light that are just going to be glowing. And then as a part of the lighting of the helipad, there's wash lighting on the helipad that basically will flood that helipad with lighting. That is not uplighting, because then you potentially would blind the pilots coming into the pad. And as you had stated, the lighting is controlled and will only be on if the pilots are under approach to the pad or departure of the pad. Normally, if they do not turn the lights off, the lighting on the pad is under a timer. So it will time itself out if they do not.
Okay. Kirk, do you want to address the safety challenge with
Sure.
the lights aren't there?
Certainly. Well, in relation to if the lights were to somehow fail, it would certainly be at the discretion of the flight crew to ensure that the safety of flight was of utmost importance, and they would simply elect to land the aircraft at another adjacent airport, most likely Waukegan National Airport in that case.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, please. With regard to the noise factor, I read in your booklet the various, the comparison of the decibels compared to how it's measured, helicopter noise. Forgive me for I'm missing the word here. But can you give us an example? Yesterday when I went by the site, I drove through the Knollwood neighborhood just to hear what everyday sounds are like over there. And I was closer to Waukegan and I was able to hear the train going by. Can you give us an example of what it would sound like to a Knollwood resident of a helicopter landing or taking off?
Sure. No, thank you for that question and concern. I'm going to ask Stephanie Ward from Mead and Hunt to provide a little and maybe elaborate a little bit more on just the noise study that was done and the relativity to that area. So Stephanie, if you want to maybe highlight or summarize our study.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a great question. And so to start, as you said, you've reviewed our information. There's two elements to it. One, we've determined through our analysis that we really see very minimal impact from a noise perspective. And that's qualified because we've gone through the analysis that the Federal Aviation Administration or the FAA would ask us to do if this were going to be a federally funded site. And so in doing so, we've looked at very specific information about the number of operations, the flight paths, so going back towards I-94, and also the aircraft itself. The Sikorsky helicopter that we're looking at is one of the quietest, if not the quietest, corporate helicopter out there on the market today. And so that plays into the anticipated noise exposure that we expect at the site. As you mentioned, if you drove through Knollwood, one of the comparisons would be that from a comparative nature, a decibel level, or excuse me, a noise contour level in that area would be what we consider to be about a 55 DNL. And that's using a metric that both the Federal Aviation Administration and the EPA, as well as Housing and Urban Development, have agreed to as being a valid method of assessment. What that does is looks at noise contours as they relate to the amount of sound that's happening over an annual basis. And so there's what's created as a contour. There's different lines that affect different levels of impact. So when we're looking at a suburban neighborhood, much like Knollwood, the DNL contour that is expected in that area is at about a 55 level. So not a decibel, that's a different measurement, but a 55 DNL contour. When we map and model the impacts from the aircraft, when it's operating at the helipad, we actually have a different contour. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask, could you bring up slide 12 or 13? The activity of the helipad and the aircraft coming into or out of when it's landing is going to generate a contour specifically at the helipad. And that contour is going to be in about the 75 DNL situation or density, if you will. So you can see the most inner kind of sort of circle that's circled right on that purple square. That's the helipad itself. So we experience the largest concentration of noise impact is that 75 DNL contour, and that's sitting directly on the helipad. As we move farther out, you can see those contours spreading out further. And you can see the farther out one that we've mapped, which is the 55 DNL contour, would be similar to what we would expect to see out at Knollwood. You can see from this graphic, the rectangular area that's up to the north of the graphic south of where it says Atkinson Road, excuse me, is the Libertyville fire station. So you can see that 55 contour is very compact. It sits within that 10-acre site that we're looking at. In fact, it doesn't even get to some of the western edge. And it follows that contour of where we're at on the approach or departure. So there will be obviously noise generated at the helipad when the aircraft is coming in or departing, but we have very little dwell time, meaning the rotors on the aircraft are not going to be running for any excessive amount of time when it's on the ground. As soon as it lands, it'll be turned off. And the same thing, we'll load the passengers and then start the rotors and then depart. So that noise contour, very comparable to what we would expect in Knollwood on a typical day at 55 DNL, we see sticking on the existing property. We actually mapped out to what we consider the edge of where the Knollwood subdivision would be, which is about 1,200 feet from the helipad itself. And when we get out to that distance, so to the northwest corner of Knollwood, we're actually in about a 40 DNL exposure. So what we see with all of that, the long story short, is that from an FAA perspective, which would be our federal modeling limitations, a 65 is what's considered to be a potential impact. You can see that that barely leaves the helipad site itself where that purple box is. And so that's the reason we've deemed that there's minimal, if any, noise impact to the surrounding community, either Knollwood or anything to the west. It's all going to stick pretty much to the site. Sorry, that was a long answer to your question. Hopefully that helped.
That was a very thorough answer, and I appreciate it. Thank you. And I have no more questions.
Great. Thanks, Member Peterson. Member Raymond. Remember to unmute yourself.
Yeah, no, can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you there.
Okay, I had quite a few questions when I received the information about this hearing, and almost all of them were answered in the application form itself. And the three questions that I did have that weren't answered were answered by the presentation of the presenter this afternoon. So in all, to cut the thing to the short, I really don't have any questions anymore. And I want to just compliment AbbVie for the presentation that they presented. It's one of the finest documents that I've read as long as I've been on the ZBA.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Marv. Member Reindl. Remember to unmute yourself, John. We don't hear. We'll come back to Member Reindl if he's having trouble there. Member Roche. Member Roche, remember to unmute yourself too if you're speaking. I think they want
Maybe
to
your
talk.
headphones aren't connected.
We'll come back while you guys straighten up there.
Just a moment. I apologize. Just Member Roche, if you're having difficulty, you might want to go down to where it has mute and unmute. Can you hear me, Member Roche? So go to where it has mute and unmute. If you look under, there's like a arrow that pops up. It says select a microphone. You might have to change your microphone. So next to mute, you'll see an arrow that's up. If you click that, it says select a microphone. You might want to toggle to the different microphone to see if that works if you're trying to use.
While she's doing that, I just see Member Reindl. Member Reindl, can you hear us now? Can we hear you?
I can hear you quite well, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. We can hear you. Go ahead, John, with your questions.
Thank you. My compliments to the petitioner for opening up his operation to emergency vehicles and emergency situations. However, the question is, how does that coincide with the number of flights in and out that has been suggested by the county? I think earlier on he said 1 and 1 or counted as 1 in and 1 out, or counted as 1. Where do you get that?
Yeah, thank you.
Do you charge a fee for those emergency sessions?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Just I'll try to clarify kind of the counts or the trips, and obviously what we put in our application. I think we showed 4 on Monday, 4 on Tuesday, 4 on Wednesday, 6 on Thursday, 6 on Friday. We just did that gating to help with the noise study that Stephanie talked about earlier. There was no specific rhyme or reason of why 6 on Thursday and 6 on Friday versus 6 on Monday, 6 on Tuesday. Again, it was just to try to make sure we could put the most realistic scenario in there. A round trip, as we would call it, would be a touchdown and a takeoff. Each of those would be considered an operation. So on days when we say there's 4, that would be 2 touchdowns and 2 takeoffs. So hopefully that clarifies just kind of the aspect of what we're talking about. Yeah, AbbVie is not interested in charging any fees for any emergency services. Our numbers do not count any emergency service use because we don't know what that would be. We absolutely believe that is a large benefit to the community. I think having it centrally located in kind of the Lake County area where we're at there really is an advantageous impact to the area. And clearly we would make that accessible to the fire department, to other sheriff department, anybody else that would need to use it, and absolutely no fees charged.
Thank you for that. The other thing that I have a question about is hospitals in the general area have to go through a rigid site plan designation by the state to meet a criteria for the hospitals to have a heliport on their property. How do you figure in with those areas?
Sure. From our perspective, we've agreed that we would operate this helipad as an FAA approved helipad. So we're designing it and managing it according to FAA requirements and regulations. In the state of Illinois, IDOT controls the permit approval process from the legality of it. We've filed the necessary paperwork with the Illinois Department of Transportation That's actually a form called an AER 2060. And they then are the liaison and coordinator with the FAA to actually drive those approval processes. We cannot move this forward any further until any area zoning. So the county zoning is a prerequisite before the FAA or anybody else will take up into consideration beyond the initial submittals of what we've done. So there's a stepwise process, and we've reviewed that both with IDOT and the FAA and feel that's the path that we're in the right track for.
So you don't figure in with the numbers of heliports within the county, even within the county, that are governed by the hospitals, by the number of them. In fact, if I can recall, there was a site distance between two hospitals that would require a certain number of miles. And the second one was that they weren't allowed to have one within close proximity to another.
Yeah, Board Member Rondo, I'm not aware of those requirements from a hospital perspective. It's not something I feel I can adequately comment on, and not something that we've evaluated from a requirements perspective.
So maybe what I hear you saying is you're not under hospital jurisdiction through the state.
That is correct. We are not. This is a private helipad, not under those considerations.
Thank you. That's all, Chair.
Great, sounds good. Thanks, John. Member Roche?
Okay, is this working now?
It is, we can hear you.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, I figured out what I did trying to make my AirPods work. Okay, so the question I'm still trying to really figure out is maybe my reading of the book that you gave us was a little too narrow, but it appeared to me like the helicopter was just going to fly from Waukegan Airport to the helipad and back to Waukegan Airport, and was struggling to find the point.
Sure. Yeah, maybe let me elaborate just a little bit more of some typical business circumstances. I mentioned in some of my opening remarks, we have, even in the state of Illinois, 2,000 different suppliers, right? We've got, as an example, a critical third-party packaging supplier in Rockford. We've got clinical trial partners in Madison, Wisconsin. We got key equipment suppliers in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. We have other suppliers in Missouri and in different locations. If we had to meet and had an issue with them, I'll give you an example as well. We have two of our plants. I mentioned Cincinnati and Wyandotte. We are a regulated industry, so we get unannounced FDA inspections as a requirement. That's just the FDA needs. So if we all of a sudden had the FDA show up at our door in Wyandotte, Michigan, we could take people right from our corporate headquarters, put them on that helicopter, and have it be there in a short period of time to respond to that FDA inspection. So it's not just shepherding people or anybody between the airport and the helipad adjacent to our corporate headquarters. It's whatever the business challenge or the unique requirements are for us to meet the needs. So there is no preset travel corridor or anything that's associated to it.
So then I guess it leads me to another question, which you had stated earlier, that part of the problem with Waukegan Airport was things were scheduled, and so you couldn't just at a minute's notice send somebody somewhere. Then if the helicopter is stored at Waukegan Airport, then how do you get it? Do the rule not apply to that helicopter? You can leave Waukegan Airport whenever you want?
Yeah, there is no requirement that I'm aware of. Kirk, is there for restrictions on helicopters at the Waukegan Airport?
No, there is not.
Okay. And then I'm a little leery of the noise. And I know you guys have done the sound study, and it certainly sounds like, the noise will be minimal. But back when my husband and I were young, we bought a house along a railroad tracks because everybody said, oh, it won't be a problem. It's, you know, it won't be too loud. And let me tell you, we lived there for 10 years. And by the 10th year, I literally thought I was going to lose my mind. I couldn't take the sound. Now, it also, depending on the weight of the rail cars that were going by, actually shook our house. So I'm not expecting that to happen with the helicopters. But that makes me a little leery. And then are there emissions that from the helicopter that we need to be worried about?
Sure. So along with the FAA, again, for us to have an FAA approved site, we've done the FAA modeling for both noise and air quality. I'm going to ask Stephanie to comment a little on the air quality results of the study that we did to hopefully give you a little bit more background.
Sure, thank you, Russ. The noise study that we did uses a tool that also is then utilized for the evaluation of air quality. And so we're able to use the same operational information, same location information, same aircraft information that we use in the noise study to look at the air quality standards. And so this is a study that's been or between the tool and the parameters that are looked at, that's an agreement between both the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, as well as FAA looking at operational impacts. And what we found, because we are talking about such a minimal amount of activity with, essentially 24 operations a week, that we have no notable air quality impacts. Everything that we modeled through the study is well below what they consider the de minimis levels, the metrics that they would set as a parameter. In fact, they're so low that it's out into the 3 and 4 place of decimal impacts compared to tonnage. That's the actual primary metric. So, we're looking at the smallest one is like a 25-ton impact annually, and we're at like decimal 0.0009 of any type of impact. So it's so minute that it's not something that is going to be considered to be an issue at all.
Board Member Roche, the other comment that I would make would be from an AbbVie perspective. Obviously, we have a corporate responsibility, a corporate sustainability program. We've committed for long-term strategic goals for reductions in waste, water, air, CO2 emissions. If you look at Lake County alone for AbbVie, since 2017, we've actually reduced our CO2 emissions by about 20%. So even despite our growth, even despite what we do, we have programs in place to continually drive those emissions down. And that's something we're very proud of.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's the rest of my questions.
Great. Thanks so much. Member Starkey.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation and for the documentation prior. My major questions were related to the flight path, which was clearly designated unless there's an emergency over I-94, and the lights, which Member Peterson already brought up, and the noise. I appreciate the schematics and the information on that. I guess one of my questions is that you have designated that there'd be 4 operations, say Monday through Wednesday, and then 6 Tuesday or Thursday, Friday, for instance. What if it's much more than that than you anticipate? What happens then?
Yeah, no, thank you. I think in my remarks, I already commented as well that, the conditions that the county department had put as part of their recommendations to the zoning board here, AbbVie would abide by those. So we would abide by the limits put into our application.
And then do we get a report on that, or does the county get a report on that? How would we know that that's being adhered to?
I don't have a tracking, or I'm not sure how we would report that or have it go forward. Obviously, we know what those commitments are, and that's what our aviation team would abide by.
Okay. I guess my only comment would be that, it'd be important for us to know what those numbers actually are so that the neighbors aren't, saying, hey, they're doing 10 operations a day or something as time moves on as the business changes. And if that were the case, then they might have to come back to this board or another organization to get that amended. So that was everybody, all the other questions of mine were answered, but that was one that I just didn't know how we would monitor that.
Sounds good. Good questions there. I shared the same concerns as Member Starkey did in regard to the operating. You know, if I look at the total annual, it's just over 1,100 operations a year, which seems like a lot over there for that area. I guess that is a concern to me, to be honest. So I guess is that, do you clearly anticipate those 444 and 6 and 6, or is that just a worst case scenario? Or give me a little more, a better comfortable feeling on that, because I do have concerns about that.
Sure. No, and obviously we had to kind of set a mark to do our modeling, to do all of the design and parameters that we've just discussed for both the noise and the air. I think also we made some comments to say some days we'd expect 0, just because there may not be an issue that we need to use it. And it's a little bit unpredictable, but we at least tried to provide what we thought was a reasonable number that is not egregious or outrageous from a use perspective. And hopefully many days we will have none. Clearly there's, we live in Chicago. There's other elements that we have to address with weather and things of that nature. So you're not going to be flying a helicopter in a snowstorm. We're going to be continue to be a good community partner, and not exceed the limits that we've abided by in the application we submitted.
Great, sounds good. And then you did allude to this early in your presentation in regard to why that area was designated and not something within Abbott Park over there. And I guess just a little further explanation, because I know if you go from east to west there along Atkinson, you've got the Abbott House, you've got, I believe, the daycare there, and then you've got, from the aerial view at least, I could see it looks like some soccer fields, maybe a softball field, and maybe some volleyball courts back there. I didn't figure out what the actual square footage was back there, or landmass was back there. Was any consideration giving it just from a safety standpoint, from a security standpoint? I'm sure it was, because it would make sense. And you did allude to the operations that go on there, but anywhere, it couldn't fit anywhere in that area to keep it within Abbott Park.
Yeah, no, those are great questions. And obviously we debated a lot of that in our early discussions on where would be. We even looked at our North Chicago site, but unfortunately in North Chicago, we have high voltage power lines that run in the back of our site. So that really is a absolute train wreck if you wanted to try to fly a helicopter on high voltage wires. So we feel, again, when you look at it from the pilot's perspective, from a safety perspective, that open field, the amount of no pedestrians and vehicle traffic in that area, that is absolutely the best and safest location going forward.
Okay. And I know that the public will probably have some questions, and Member Roche alluded to it as well too, that, I was on the city council down in Wheeling where Chicago Executive is too, so familiar with the operations of a municipal airport like that. When it comes to, if they had to drive 20 minutes to Waukegan Airport, they could most likely take off within an acceptable amount of time, just as she had mentioned that a helicopter, if it has to take off from Waukegan to get to the heliport here, could do that too. So I guess explain that a little bit more to me on why a 20-minute drive one way is going to make such a big difference if you've got to get to XYZ plant somewhere else, that noise and everything else is going to change. Is that important?
Yeah, no, and clearly I think, we recognize that there's an element of convenience, as I stated earlier, related to this location, and we don't shy away from that. But we also have to be able to understand that it's not just a 20-minute drive, it's any delays that we may get from flight control, from anything else at Waukegan National Airport. We just can't control. We're trying to look at, if we're going to make this investment, we'd like to provide the optimal case related to how close it would be to our headquarters. And I think, again, if we just said we're going to do it at Waukegan National Airport, we also then forego the community benefit of what we could provide for Lake County as far as emergency services. So I think it's ultimately a win-win for both AbbVie and for the county if we have it adjacent to our headquarters.
Sure, sounds good. The other question I had too is, we're always cognizant whether someone's building a garage or a heliport that's a lot more obtrusive. Did you have any pre-meetings with any of the residents in the area? I think that's always important to let them know what's going on. Any discussions with the residents in the area before you move forward? And if so, was feedback incorporated into this plan as part of that, or are you continuing to?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. It's a great question. Our stakeholder outreach has been ongoing since the start of this project. Obviously, we've engaged stakeholders to discuss the project scope. I think you see in our application the the support that we've gotten from, Lake County Sheriffs, Lake County Partners, City of North Chicago, Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital, Libertyville Fire Department. We reached out to various agencies, Green Oaks, we talked about just for, when we were thinking about how to connect the sewer, what's the best opportunities, we went to them. We did have a sit down with the Norwood Neighbors Association. So that was 4 different people. I think it was Jeff Urso, Nikki Snoblin, Susan Dennis, and Carl Snoblin, just again to make them aware. Reached out to board member Rummel, board member Ann Rame. Again, just to make that people aware of what we're thinking, to address their concerns. I think if any feedback came back from that, again, like anybody else, everybody is the first thing they consider is noise, and why this area. That's the 2 questions that anybody, and those are good questions. Those are the right questions to ask. And I think, through our application and through the comments you heard today, I think we've addressed, safety is the #1 issue for why we chose that location. And from a helicopter pilot perspective, it's ideal. And then I think we've demonstrated through our reports and through the modeling studies that we don't feel this is going to be an impact to the neighborhood.
Sounds good. I appreciate that. It's always good to hear that you did that ahead of time. It helps out. That is all the questions I have right now. I'll probably have some more once we hear from the public as well. Board members, before I explain to the public how it works now, any follow-up questions from any of the board members before we move to the next part of the agenda?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
He touched briefly on the sewer business. Can he expand on that a little bit? He said he had conversation with North Chicago relative to sewer hookups and so on.
Sure. This is Russ. When we looked at it, obviously we have a couple restrooms, right? We think, that's the right thing to do in that location. And so we wanted to look at what's the best option for sewer connections. Obviously our first choice is we went and talked to Abbott to see if we could connect into the sanitary sewer at Abbott Park. And they didn't provide us the approval to do that. We then went to, I think, the next closest capability, and that was the city of or village of Green Oaks, and they also turned us down. I think those letters are in our application. And I think based on the limited amount of use, we're going to just provide a holding tank that we would design and build into that, and have it self-contained at the actual project site or the building site.
As opposed to constructing a septic field?
That's correct. Again, we don't feel just the use is not going to be significant enough to warrant that, and we just have two single-use restrooms that make it used once a day if we're even operating the helicopter.
What about washing of the helicopters? Where does that wastewater go, or that dark water?
Yeah, as I stated in my opening remarks, the maintenance, the fueling, the upkeep, all of that helicopter would all be done at Waukegan National Airport. So it'd just be pickup and departure that would be done at the helipad itself.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Chairman,
Thanks, Chairman. Yep, go ahead.
I have one more question. To piggyback on Member Roche's question about the time factor of, you have an executive that needs to go to Sheboygan or Cincinnati, whatever. So the helicopter gets a call, comes over to Abbott on Atkinson, executive is ready, gets on the helicopter, and then gets flown back to Waukegan. Waukegan, because it's a helicopter, Waukegan doesn't have to have control over your helicopter schedule. But you did say earlier in the very beginning of your statement that the flights going in and out of Waukegan are regulated. So how do you know that you're going to be able to get out on a quick flight to Cincinnati, Sheboygan, Minneapolis, wherever you're going? Right? So you're telling us on the one hand, you have freedom to operate your helicopter at any time, but on the other hand, the airplane in and of itself does not have that same freedom. So can you reconcile the two, please?
Sure. I think, again, if you just took a normal kind of the description, if we knew we had an FDA inspection at our Wyandotte, Michigan location, we would be notifying the aviation department. Kirk and his team would get a notification that we're going to need to fly. They would then prepare the helicopter to come to our helipad. So there's a stage of planning and process that's engaged or involved in that earlier. So it's not just, we can't just make a phone call and it's already departed. There is advance notice for that to occur. We make it easier for our employees that have to go if they can just go and take their car at Abbott Park, drive across the street, and get in that helicopter and go, rather than going to the airport. So all of that is just part of the upfront planning. And as I stated, we know there's a convenience factor to that. We don't shy away from that. But again, I think we can optimize our ability to respond by having it adjacent to our headquarters more so than being at the airport.
Right, I understand that part, but my question is how does the flight, how are you ensuring that your airplane then is leaving at a particular time on time from Waukegan to wherever it needs to be? I get the helicopter part. My question is, I had a friend who used to work for the FAA, was an air traffic controller, and he told me one time, if your kid needs to get on a flight early, let me know. Yeah. So is that how I'm just wondering.
I just want to make sure. So if we had the example of us having to go to our Wyandotte, Michigan site, they would pick the employees up at the helipad. From the helipad, they would fly directly to Wyandotte, Michigan, fly back and land at the helipad, drop the employees back off, and the helicopter would go back to the hangar in Waukegan National Airport for storage or for next use at the next time it was available. Did that give a little more clarity, or do I need to?
No, it didn't, but let's move on. Unless somebody else can clarify.
Well, so I have a question. Okay, so again, wrapping around this. So your complex is big, right? You have to call Waukegan. You have to tell them to send the helicopter to the helipad. Then the person has to get from wherever in your complex to the helipad. And then they get in the helicopter and they fly to Cincinnati. They don't have to go to Waukegan Airport, right? That helicopter will be able to fly them directly to Cincinnati from the helipad. Okay. So, but my question is the time that it takes for them to call Waukegan Airport, tell them that they want the helicopter, get the pilot in the helicopter, get it checked out, fueled, sent to the helipad. Why is that more time effective than just keeping the helicopter in Waukegan and driving them to Waukegan and flying to Cincinnati from Waukegan?
Yeah, I think, as I stated, it's still a matter of convenience and agility for us to be able to keep people at their location, working in their office and saying, I can take the next 5 minutes and that's all I need to go over to the helipad before my flight. If they happen to go to the airport, they're going to have to probably waste another hour of the day. And I don't mean waste in a bad way or in a negligible way, but that's just optimizing the time and agility. The value of employees' times, whether it's the packaging engineer that may be helping troubleshoot a line at a supplier, or an executive that needs to fly somebody, that's time that we value. It may seem small to others, but I think, again, if we want to look at it as an optimal ability for us, we would choose to put it next to our corporate headquarters.
Mr. Gerich, if I could ask a question too, how many of your other facilities that you operate around the United States have a heliport there?
We don't have any other heliports at any of our other facilities.
Okay, so for instance, if the helicopter left here, Lake County, and had to go to Michigan, where would it have to land there? Does it have to go to an airport then, or does it go? Is it a little more rural there, or give me that explanation too?
Sure, I'll ask Kirk Mees to talk about just the availability of helipads in any areas generally across the U.S.
Actually, Russ, can I take that?
Oh, sure.
Hi, I'm Rick Fiddler. A couple things. I want to jump on one of the questions earlier that Russ was answering. When you go to O'Hare Airport to take a flight, you arrive early, you wait in line, you get on the airplane. Sometimes you taxi out, the airplane sets it out on the field for 20 minutes before you take off. The reason for that is the air traffic control system for instrument or large airplanes is controlled above 18,000 feet, and only so many airplanes are allowed into that airspace. A helicopter isn't controlled in that same airspace. So a helicopter can just pick up and go directly to Cincinnati. An airplane has to taxi out, climb out, level off, accelerate, start its descent, get vectored around the airport, come in and land, taxi back to an FBO, fixed base operator, get out, walk in, get a cab and go. So that answers that question. The question about going to the other complexes, a helicopter legally, per the guidelines of the Federal Aeronautics Administration, can land at any property that the owner deems accessible and safe to land. So if they wanted to land at their Wyandotte plant or their Sheboygan plant, as long as they have permission from the owner, which is themselves, and the pilots deem that it's safe, legally, per the FAA, they can land there. And then the other question was the time. I will guarantee you that the helicopter flying from Atkinson Road to Cincinnati will beat an airplane by at least a couple of hours in that flight. Even though the airplane travels a lot faster, by the time you go to the airport, taxi out, get a clearance and climb out and go, same with when you land in Cincinnati. The helicopter will beat that aircraft by a couple hours.
Right. Right, but my question wasn't about taking an airplane to Cincinnati. My question was about driving, the time it would take to drive from Abbott to Waukegan Airport, get in the helicopter and fly to Cincinnati versus the time it would take to call for the helicopter, get it to Abbott, and then get to the helicopter and then go to Cincinnati. That's my question. Like, if you go to Waukegan Airport to fly out on your personal helicopter, do you still have to go through what kind of security do you have to go through?
It's a little time by driving to the airport, then you're going to get out, you're going to walk through the hangar facility, you're going to go out and get into the helicopter, where here the helicopter will be waiting for you by the time you got here. Then you're going to start up and taxi out. Now, granted, their clearance is going to be a lot quicker than a fixed wing. So I see your point, but you still have to drive to the airport, the convenience of it being here. Other places, Sheboygan, Wisconsin, Wyandotte, some of the other ones, it just makes sense. And it's a lot more convenient having it this close to the facility.
Yeah, and I think, we've talked a lot about you get a call, an uninspected inspection. We do have, scheduled plans and trips that we know in advance that we may have a key business review, a key negotiation with a supplier. Those can be scheduled and said at 8 o'clock, that will be the departure time. So that is the convenience of people knowing at 8 o'clock, I'm coming into my office, get a few things done, and I know I got to get over to the helipad at 8 o'clock to leave. So it works both ways, both for planned and unplanned circumstances.
Mr. Garrett, can I direct that question then to your aviation manager there on how he would see this moving forward if it took off from here and went to Wyandotte? Where would he anticipate that landing? Would it land in a field by Wyandotte, in a parking lot, or would it be at the airport?
Well, again, I've never been to the Wyandotte operation, but if there's a parking lot that is operated by AbbVie in Wyandotte, big enough that the pilot and command deems safe to land, there's no rule or regulation that says he can't do that.
So would that most likely be what's going to take place here on a regular basis as they're going there? I mean, I'm just trying to look for are we just saving a little time here by not going to the airport and we're still going to the airport in Wyandotte? Or is there, I assume
the closest airport to Wyandotte would probably be Metro or Detroit City, and you're probably going to add at least another half hour to 45 minutes of drive time at that location also.
Any other questions from any other board members before I open it up to the public for questions? And I will do that with staff. Since you've got the ability, I'm going to have staff explain once again how we're going to open that up to the public. But one more time, any other board members at this time?
Just a moment. Dennis had his hand raised earlier, his virtual hand, and I'm not sure. Dennis, do you have any questions?
No, my question was answered. I wanted to clarify that they weren't flying to Waukegan to get on a plane. getting the helicopter from the heliport and going to Cincinnati or Wyandotte. I'm clear on that.
Okay. Thanks, Dennis. Seeing no more from the board right now, I know we do have some public that have been patiently waiting, so thank you. At this time, it'll be questions from the public of anything you've heard in this presentation or anything that a board member has brought up in response to the presentation. If you have comments before that are either for or against this application, hold off on those right now. We'll give you an opportunity to make those for or against comments after questions first. So right now, questions only. Hannah, if you want to go ahead and explain how you want to bring those people in for questions, that'd be appreciated.
I'm actually going to just go over the technical part. Krista's actually keeping the list of questions, but just again, for anyone that is participating, if you would like to speak, Krista will call on those names that she has. We'll try and start with the, again, questions and move to the objection or support statements when possible, but some we don't know which one it's going to be. But just so everyone knows, to unmute and mute yourself, you go down to the left side of your screen and you'll see a little speaker. There's a line through when it's muted, or a microphone, I'm sorry, line through when it's muted, or no line when it's unmuted. I cannot control your muting and unmuting. I can ask you to, but most people have to do it themselves. And anyone who is on the phone, you will need to press *6 to unmute and mute yourselves. And with that, I think Krista has quite a comprehensive list of attendees who'd like to speak.
I do.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And just before you begin, Krista, just a reminder that we limit it to 3 minutes. Krista's going to keep time just so we can get everybody's comments in there. If somebody's repeating a question that you had, if you want to make it a little more concise or add to it, that'd be great. So Krista, if you want to go ahead and begin.
Okay, thank you. What I'm going to do, I've sort of separated all the statements and comments that we've received from folks into the first set, which is mostly questions. Some of them were a hybrid approach, they included comments and questions, so we'll try and get through these as best we can. So the first one was submitted by Lisa and Steve Schwartz, and they had around 5 questions. They wanted to know, how often will the aircraft be landing and taking off, and what days of the week and times of the day that will the heliport be in operation? What I'm going to do is just read through all the questions from each person, and then I'll pause and have a chance for the AbbVie folks to respond before I move on to the next person. So then the next question from Lisa and Steve was, will the heliport have an approach radar or other RF and or high power microwave emitting devices? Will the heliport have lights on every night? If so, what kind of lights? What environmental impact will the heliport have on the surrounding neighborhoods and forested areas? And why can't Waukegan Airport be used instead of using so many resources to build a new heliport close to so many households? So I know we've touched on some of these topics already. If we could have the applicants summarize, I can repeat a question if needed.
Okay, thank you. I think I tried to take the notes of what the questions were here. I think for the number of flights and the time, I think as we stated in our application, 24 operations on a weekly basis between the hours, excuse me, of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. So I think we're pretty clear on that. Approach radar, Kirk, do you want to make any comments on?
There will be no approach radar or RF emitting devices on the helipad.
Okay. And then I think the next note I had was the environmental impact. I think, again, from the noise and air study that we've done and shown and included in our application, the conclusion of those is we feel that there is no impact from either the noise or the air emissions perspective. And I think we've probably discussed enough the Waukegan versus the Atkinson Road options.
I got to go to work
anymore.
Okay. Moving on to the next person, we have, it was Mario Salas. So his first question, is it possible to schedule a test flight, landing and takeoff to get a sense of the noise level? The next question, are there plans to build fuel storage on site included in this request? I believe it was already stated that it was not. Correct me if I'm wrong. Will any chemicals be stored on site? If yes, what are they? What are the proposed approach and takeoff flight paths for the rotary aircraft? Please clarify the proximity. Will these paths be to Waukegan Road? I would hope and outbound flights will occur over the open field west of the facility and closer to the railroad tracks and highway than near Waukegan Road. Number 4, can you explain FAA requirements and regulations for flying rotary aircraft near residential areas pertinent to the zoning request? And his last question, has a study or studies been conducted on the potential effect of property values to residences near the proposed site? If yes, what was it and are they publicly available? So again, I can repeat any of those questions.
Okay, we'll take a try at going through these, and if I miss any of them, please come back to me on it.
Okay.
I think scheduling a test or a flight, I don't, can it be done, guys?
I mean, we certainly could, but of course, there is no helipad at the site right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. So that would be a little problematic that.
We
till the
wouldn't,
helipad
we wouldn't
was
be
there.
able to land, certainly, in that field as it currently stands without a helipad.
Yeah.
Okay. You're correct. In our application, we stated, and in my remarks as well, there will be no fuel storage on site. I think the next question was regarding chemical storage. We are not planning any known chemicals. There may be some, lubricating oils or other things as part of normal, maintenance things that may be there, but nothing more than you'd have in your normal garage at home. I think proposed flight paths, it'd probably be worth it for us to pull up, I think it was slide 12 again.
Actually, I think it's 9, 10, and 11.
Or 9, 10, 11?
Yeah.
Hannah, if you could share your screen again to show those flight paths, those slides.
Give me just a moment.
Russ, you want me to take that?
Yeah, please, Rick.
If you look there on, I think it's slide 9, 10, and 11. When we met originally to look at the site, we evaluated everything based on safety. We met with IDOT, Illinois Department of Transportation, and the Federal Aviation Administration. Like Mr. Garrick said in his opening remarks, looking for the safest possible arrival and departures. And the things that we look at when we look at that, first we look at the overall safety in an emergency. Then we look at determine prevailing winds. Here the prevailing winds are out of the southwest. Then we look at noise mitigation. We evaluate all the obstacles, including towers, power lines, trees, or any residential flyover or commercial flyover areas. And if you can see, here to the west of the helipad, there is literally nothing except for a large bean field. The helicopter will always arrive on a designated helicopter route already established in the Chicago airspace that runs along I-94. They'll go to a point in space, which you can see there on slide 10, coming in from the southwest. At that point is when they would drop down at altitude and do a continual descent to the pad. Land, drop their passenger or pick up their passenger, pick it up, and they would depart on that same corridor back to I-94. At that time, they'll be at least 1,000 feet to 2,000 feet, and they'll continue on course down that corridor to their destination. And again, the FAA would like to see 3 arrival points to a helipad and departure points, but they require 2 to make it a certified heliport. This one does have 3 just because it was a perfect site. When I met with the FAA and the Illinois Department of Transportation, we all determined that this was probably the best site we'd ever dealt with. I've been doing this since 1969 around helicopters and airplanes. I've never dealt with a helipad that is this wide open and safety for all reasons.
Okay. Rick, while you're there as well, clearly, as we said, I think the one question was, we presume the flight paths would be all to the west or from the west. I think we've showed that with the slides here. FAA requirements, I think, was another one for flying near residential areas. I think just to state, clearly we've intended and will operate this helipad under FAA approval, under FAA guidelines. It's designed accordingly. Rick, I don't know if you have any comments about just.
No, there are really no guidelines for where you can operate a helicopter, and legally, AbbVie would never do this. They've already inserted it into their flight manual. They will fly all the time at 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 feet. A helicopter is legal to fly literally above the treetops, and there's no rule that says he can't. The only time he has to be careful on altitude is when he's inside of what they call a terminal control area like O'Hare or Minneapolis-St. Paul or Detroit Metro. Those are restricted areas where he will have to abide by the altitude restrictions. But a helicopter legally can fly over your house at any altitude it wants to, as long as it does not cause possible safety to you on the ground.
And then I think, Krista, the last one I jotted down
Was the study, has a study been conducted on potential effect of property values to residences near the proposed site?
there is no study that has been conducted.
Okay. And then just to follow up, his second question was, will chemicals be stored on site? You mentioned that there might be some, oil, like, just like maybe elaborate on that again, just because the follow-up question with that was, what safety risk mitigation measures will be taken if there's any leakages? So I know you're going to have some, you said some vehicles for snow removal and things like that. So, maybe you've got some, oil leakage or something from a vehicle you've got stored on site. If you can speak to that, just to make sure we're encompassing.
I think it'd be absolute minimal. It'd be, like I said, no more of an oil can that you may store in your garage as part of our design from the, as we talked about for the holding tank. We do have a oil collection, I believe, Richard, that's included. Maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah, as part of the holding tank for any drainage within the building, there's a separate holding tank for anything that comes off the floor drains within the building, as versus the toilet facilities. So there's two really holding tanks for that. As far as entering into there, that on most airports and in most operations, I know AbbVie has spill containment protocol. If something does happen, on the apron or on that, but that is normal operational. There's nothing that, since they're not fueling at this, there's nothing extraordinary.
Okay, I'm going to move on to, we have had some questions from Diane. When there is a large accident on 41 or the 94 and news helicopters flying around, it is very noisy. This helipad is much closer than the highways. I live in the Knollwood neighborhood adjacent to the helipad, so I will be affected by these lights. Sorry, that was a statement, actually. So apparently, what is the actual noise comparison? So that was her question. I can read that again. I'm sorry, that was a little bit.
Please.
So her statement / question, what is the actual noise comparison when there is a large accident on 41 or the 94 and news helicopters are flying around? It is very noisy. This helipad is much closer than the highways. I live in the Knollwood neighborhood adjacent to the helipad, so I will be affected by these flights.
Can I take that?
Yeah, Rick, please, could you respond?
I'm assuming, unless it was medevac helicopters, it's probably a traffic report helicopter, and they're probably flying very low to try to get a good look, try to get a good video. That's very common. They'll be down at the treetop level flying. And I want to clarify one thing. When I said that helicopters can fly as low as they want, that is true. But AbbVie has already put into their flight manual, they will always fly at 2 to 3, maybe even 5,000 feet. The only time they'll be flying less than that altitude is when they start their descent from 94 to the pad, or on the ascent climbing out of the helipad to 94 for their departure part.
But Rick, can you also comment about the model of our helicopter compared to what you would see from a news helicopter?
Yeah, this is a Sikorsky SK-76 helicopter. It is a very quiet helicopter for being a large helicopter, and it's designed that way. The tail rotor design is for noise mitigation. The main blades have a swept tip on them to mitigate the noise. When you think of helicopters like a news reporter helicopter or possibly a military helicopter, the blade tips are squared off. And so as that blade's advancing, it actually is breaking the sound barrier. And that's what's giving you that popping noise, that bump, bump, bump noise of an old Vietnam Huey. This helicopter will not have that sound. This sounds more like a car, more like a truck or a lawnmower maybe.
Okay, thank you. The next question came from Elisa Spano, and she actually had both comments and questions. So I'm going to bifurcate her correspondence. I will save her statement for later, but I will go into her questions now. So the first question was, how will the proposed flight plans be enforced? At some point, could they decide to fly over our homes to the east? AbbVie says that there will be 4 to 8 flights on most days between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. They say it will not be used on weekends. How will this be monitored and enforced? Will they be allowed to increase usage at some point? Why are other locations that do not border a residential neighborhood and a daycare center not being considered? And then that goes back into her comments. So, and just from a staff perspective, I'd like to I guess, comment myself on some of those questions. So anything to do with the operation of the heliport, if it were to be approved, it would be monitored and would have to follow the same regulations as any other conditional use permit would follow per our ordinance. So if there was some sort of substantial modification in terms of flight paths, modification to the operations that were, if they were approved, and then AbbVie decided that they needed to make some modifications to that, they would actually have to go through the have their CUP amended, which, depending on the level of modification, would most likely entail going through the public hearing process again. So we would, monitor it as we do any other conditional use. So if we start receiving complaints from nearby residents that they're flying outside of their normal, their approved hours, or they're flying more flights than they were approved for, it would follow the violations process that's outlined in our code. That would be from the county's perspective. So if AbbVie wants to respond, how they're willing, how they would comply with the proposed flight plans, if they would, at some point, can they decide to fly over our homes to the east, and then again, flying on weekends or increased numbers of flights. And then her last question was, why not other locations that don't border a residential neighborhood and a daycare not being considered?
All right, I'm going to try to take a couple comments at some of those. I think when we look at just the area for our helipad, this does technically not border residential. All surrounding land is considered limited industrial or the like. So just want to make sure that's clarified. When we look at daycare, obviously Abbott Park owns and operates a daycare at Abbott Park. When we looked at our flight paths, and I think you saw those in the drawings, we tried to find the optimal flight paths that provide, as Rick Fiddler discussed, the safest approaches, safest departures. And I think the ones that we've shown are the ones that we view as the safest. The comments back on the increased usage, I think we've tried to, I'm sorry. On the increased usage, we've tried to forecast, and as I talked about in our numbers earlier, what we envision is both our current and future needs. We don't see, usage needs beyond what we've submitted in our application and what we said we're already willing to abide by. We will not operate the helipad on the weekends, and that was again part of our the comments in the application. Any other things?
I think you covered everything, yeah.
Russ, I can, Kirk, yep. If I could just make one comment, this is Kirk Meese. There would be absolutely no reason at all to either arrive or depart from the east. And we really carefully and intentionally chose these arrival and departure paths that come from the northwest, the southwest, and the west with that in mind. They would, from a pilot's perspective or a flight safety perspective, we would never fly over the neighborhood to the east or the daycare to the northeast. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Okay. We've had multiple questions from a Catherine Lisco. I'm just going to actually read these one at a time and let you respond to each one of them because there's so many. Please ask AbbVie how they anticipate the COVID vaccine response to impact the number of heliport operations.
The number of heliport operations will be independent of COVID vaccine. There's no relationship.
Second question from Ms. Lisco. Please ask the AbbVie representative, Stephanie Ward, please comment on the difference between DNL impact of one operation is not the same as the total effect of DNL noise interruptions during a day/week as a cumulative effect on the neighborhood.
Stephanie, you want to make any comment on that?
Sure. That's a true statement. We did not model anything in a single event occurrence. What we did is utilizing the FAA's criteria, we average it on looking at the overall 1,200 operations that are anticipated. So that takes into account what we expect that to look like at on an annual basis, and that is the standard of measurement that the FAA and HUD and EPA uses their benchmark, is that annualized number as it relates to the DNL.
Why, this also again from Ms. Lisco, why would AbbVie not need to coordinate with Waukegan Airport for air traffic control, whether they are taking off from Waukegan or from the Abbott Heliport?
I can take that.
Yeah.
So the airspace that is controlled by the Waukegan Airport is 4 miles in diameter from the center of Waukegan Airport. And so the airspace for the proposed helipad site is not under the jurisdiction of Waukegan National Airport.
Continuing on, please ask AbbVie whether individual employees/executives will be allowed to request heliport rides from their residences in Chicago or outside North Chicago as a ride to work.
The intent of the helipad is not for a commuting purposes. It is for a business purposes, as I discussed in my opening remarks. It's multiple business challenges, whether it's our facilities, as I described, whether it's the supply chain partners, business meetings, all of the above are the intended use for this helipad.
Okay, continuing on, we have a question from Mrs. Lisco, or Ms. Lisco, excuse me. Noise pollution for the residential property associated with helicopters is hugely impactful for the board to allow to happen to its residential citizens. We pay taxes to live in a residential community, not an airport. Why would the board consider this land use change? Her second, please let us know why only certain property owners were sent letters about this land use change, this radical land use change. Why did we receive a letter? Did we receive a letter because we were in direct traffic lane or most likely having noise pollution? On what basis were the letters sent out? I would like to respond to that one. So the minimum requirements for noticing this properties, our ordinance states that at a very minimum, adjacent properties must be noticed. And beyond that, it defers to including properties that would be impacted by the proposed use. So there's no set radius or distance. We look at these on a case-by-case basis. So in this case, we looked at the proposed flight paths. We did use an approximate distance, in proximity to the helipad site, and that's how we determined who received the notice. Her third question, please discuss why this parcel of land was chosen for this application and why another property owned by Abbott closer to its already developed property, including but not limited to rooftops of its buildings, is not suitable for use. Her fourth question is the requested zoning change associated with giving only Abbott companies or AbbVie executives transportation to Abbott AbbVie. What will prevent the permission sought now to be changed to a public or commercial use in the future? Just to respond to that quickly, it is not a requested zoning change, so the property is zone limited industrial. There's no rezoning application associated with this. Heliports are permitted in the limited industrial zoning district with an approved conditional use permit. What would prevent the permission sought now to be changed to a public or commercial use is that it would have to, that would be considered a modification of the CUP if this were to be approved, and they would have to go through the CUP amendment process. What is the difference in noise pollution between tilt rotor and other types of helicopters? What hours of operation have been proposed, and under what circumstances will permitted hours be changed if this land use is allowed? Do you want to touch on the difference in noise pollution between tilt rotor and other types of helicopters?
I can try, but I've never flown a tilt rotor. I've never been close to one when it flies. That's something we're gonna have to, if you want, we're gonna have to look into it for a noise study or a noise data from the manufacturer. This is not a tilt rotor helicopter by any means.
Yeah, I would just say off of that, I would say AbbVie has no intention of operating a tilt rotor off of this helipad. That's just never been a consideration, and I'm not familiar with tilt rotor noise
I'm not
signatures either.
But to clarify, this is not a tilt rotor helicopter, correct?
It is not.
It is
That's
not.
correct.
Okay. Next question on her list. Have there been studies of other helicopter pads in the US and the effect on suburban residential neighborhoods or the environmental impact on nature and other protected species or preserves? If not, why not? And please consider this a respectful request to have more information about the noise impact on protected lands and protected species, as well as property values. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Paul Bollinger, who's online with us, to talk a little about what AbbVie did from the protected species, the eco submission with the DNR and things. Paul, if you want to maybe elaborate a little on that.
Yes, of course. Thanks, Russ. Yeah, we submitted to the IDNR through their EcoCat tool to look at if there was an impact to endangered and threatened species. And we made our submittal to them. It came back from the DNR as a consultation terminated, stating that there are no state species that will be impacted by the development. And to follow up on that, we also put together consultation section 7 of the Endangered Species Act to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and that also came back that no threatened or federally threatened or endangered species will be impacted.
Why does Abbott need the heliport when it is so close to airports? I know that question, I believe, has already been asked. Yeah. And she asked what would prevent future use to be opened as a commercial public business. As explained, it would have to go through a CUP amendment process. Please explain briefly what priority medical use would be required to be given and discuss any need for medical transport in this community.
I'll take a kind of a stab at that. We are not experts at the medical service, medical transport. All we're doing is allowing access for this helipad to be available for it.
If needed, correct?
Yeah, correct, if needed. And so, we have made it clear that we're open to that use at any time. And clearly that would be a priority for us to make sure we supported the community for that. But we don't, AbbVie nor I do not know what's involved in a medical transport or any other requirements related to that. I think there's other experts that are qualified to speak to that, but not us.
Her next question, please explain the review, and this may be something that the board addresses at some point. Please explain the review and voting process by the board on this application for land use change. Please consider this issue as a vital concern to residential property owners and delay any vote until public vetting can be more inclusive and comprehensive. There's 2 more questions, actually three more questions from Ms. Lisco. maybe the board can, Greg, if you can respond to that question once we're done with hers. So I can continue with questioning AbbVie. Please identify the owners and managers of Atkinson North Chicago LLC and AbbVie Aviation LLC.
AbbVie Aviation LLC is AbbVie. It's just a separate legal entity within our company. I've been assigned as the manager of that. That's part of my normal responsibilities. I manage all the day-to-day operations across all Lake County and US sites for AbbVie. And then Atkinson LLC is a separate entity for Abbott.
And then finally, actually, I'm sorry. Please ask the board to comment, or maybe this is more appropriate for AbbVie. Please ask to comment individually on why the risk of weather or other flight accidents is worth the risk of its citizens located close to the heliport.
Is that question to AbbVie or to the board?
Well, it was worded as a question to the board, but I think it's probably more appropriate to AbbVie.
Yeah, I think maybe Rick, if you want to comment about just
can you ask can you ask it again?
I can read it again for sure. Please ask the board to comment individually on why the risk of weather or other flight accidents is worth the risk of its citizens located close to the heliport.
Well, first of all, AbbVie has no intent of operating the helicopter in and out of there in bad weather. And as far as safety, we'll go back to the location. We looked at many locations around this area, around AbbVie, inside the grounds. And again, after doing this for my entire life, I've never seen a better location as far as safety goes. For both the operation or anybody around it. It's literally acres and acres of bean fields.
What I'd also like to do is, Kirk, if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more on some of our safety protocols, some of the things from AbbVie Aviation that your team does, that would be helpful, I think, here.
Sure, I'd be happy to. First of all, as far as the question goes in relation to weather at the helipad, we intend to use this helipad only in visual meteorological conditions or good weather. It's going to be very nice weather conditions, and the pilots will approach and depart the helipad in visual conditions only. You know, I'm very proud of our flight department, and what I'm excited about this helicopter is we're going to operate this helicopter to the same very high standards that we operate our existing fixed wing aircraft. We have, first of all, our pilots. Here's an example. Our pilots each have over 5,500 hours of flight time in helicopters. They are all airline transport pilot rated pilots, which is the highest attainable rating for pilots. I could go on and on. We really have taken safety. I mean, that's my job, is to make sure those aircraft and the people on those aircraft are safe. And I take that very seriously. And I can assure you this helicopter will be operated to the highest level of safety.
And then there was, she's Miss Lisco and Lester Weborg, their comment letter. It included a comment at the beginning and ending of the list of questions. So I'm going to circle back to that once we get into the strictly comments portion of the meeting. We have had a request from Drew Irvin to speak and ask a question, and we've had a request from Elisa Spano to ask a question. So I would like to turn the floor over first to Drew, if he's on and can unmute himself so that he may ask his question directly. And then once he is done, we will hear from Lisa Spano. And we had a request to speak from a Rohan Mehta. I apologize if I'm saying your name wrong. I'm not sure if you wanted to make a question or comment, so we'll allow you to speak after Lisa. And then from that, I believe we have covered all the questions. So then once we close, we can, I'll go back to Greg and let him turn it back over to comments. But so we have, again, Drew Irvin, Lisa Spano, and Rohan Mehta. So Drew, are you on?
I am. Can you hear me, Krista?
I can.
Great, thank you. Appreciate this hearing and everyone's patience.
Absolutely.
Two questions, really. One dealing with exclusivity of use of the helipad, just so I understand it. Is this for AbbVie only, or would Abbott have access to it? I guess I was surprised to find out that Abbott Corporate Park did not already have a helipad. And the question I guess I had was this something that was going to be the only helipad for the corporate property, or could there be another one in the, I guess, potentially in the future if this is exclusively for AbbVie use? And my second question deals with noise. And maybe Stephanie can answer this. And she's kind of commented on how the units of measurement are used commonly with, I guess, DNL. I'm more familiar with decibel ratings and decibels at property lines. I don't know if it's possible to maybe transpose or convert the DNL data into, say, so for most people say, well, what's the sound of at the property line of a helicopter? Is that something you can say, is it 100 decibels? Is it, 120 decibels? What is that? So I guess because I'm not familiar with the DNL standards. So those are my two questions. Thank you.
Sure. No, thank you, Drew. This is Russ with AbbVie. I'll try to answer those. I think the first question was in relationship to the exclusivity. This is exclusive to AbbVie. It is not going to be used by Abbott. We are the designated rep for this, and it will be exclusive for AbbVie, other than what we've already agreed to for emergency services personnel. I think the second question then was a little more comparison on units of measure. I'm going to just try to throw a couple comments out there, and then I'm going to ask maybe Stephanie to highlight that a little bit more. I think, obviously, Drew, from a noise level, I'm going to give you a comparison. If you look at the manufacturer's data for the Sikorsky helicopter, at the actual helicopter itself, it's around, I think, 89 to 93 decibels, right? To put a perspective on that, a fire engine, if you are right at Jason, and I think a engine, the national standards for a fire engine is like 120 to 125 decibels, right? So compare the sound of a fire engine noise from a decimal to the Sikorsky right adjacent to each of those units, and you're going to see just a natural comparison from that perspective. I think, Stephanie, do you want to make any more comments about just the decibel versus DNL?
Sure, and that's a great question, because we are used to usually talking about noise more in a decibel measurement. So as Russ just mentioned, the aircraft, when it's either landing or taking off, is around an 89 to about 93 decibels either, and it varies between takeoff and landing. As a comparison, that's right at the helipad site. So as it comes in to land or take off, we're going to be experiencing that level of decibel at the site itself. When we get out towards the residential neighborhoods, you can imagine, number one, we're about 1,200 feet or a quarter mile away from the site. So we've obviously got distance that's going to dissipate that sound. As a comparison, about a 90 decibels, so about that average of what we expect on takeoff or landing, that in a comparable setting, in a residential setting, if you're about 3 feet away from a gas-powered lawnmower when you're outside, that's comparable to a 90 decibel, according to national standards. On an indoor situation, if you're standing about 3 feet away from a food blender when it's being used, when it's on, that's going to give off about a 90 decibel level. So, for comparison purposes, that's what you might expect, in around your home, to give you an idea of what that sound would be. And that's the comparable noise that's happening at the helipad, directly where the helicopter is operating, not out where we'd be at the property line. So we expect that decibel level to be much reduced, obviously, when we get out to the property line of not only our 10-acre site, but certainly by the time we get to any of the residential neighborhoods.
I think maybe the one other point to add to that is, Kirk, maybe if you could talk about the length of time it takes from your approach to actual landing, just to give a time stamp around that noise aspect.
Sure. From the time that the aircraft would be beginning its approach to land over Interstate 94 to the time that it actually landed would be maybe 90 seconds at most. At that point, it's going to shut the rotors and the engines off, load the passengers up, and then begin the process of starting the rotors again
and departing. Departure again would take 90 seconds approximately to depart before it was back over the highway.
So Drew, I hopefully that answered or gave you a little bit more
It certainly
clarity.
did. No, appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Next question, was it Lisa or Elisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Spano. I'm a resident that lives right next to this proposed site. And I was not notified in advance other than the letter. But my question is, we're all talking about how quiet the AbbVie helicopter is, the flight path they're using, how limited they're going to be using it. However, if you're opening it up to other agencies to use, do you have any control over how loud their helicopters are, what hours and how frequently they may need to use it? I understand it's for emergency use, but their helicopters could be much louder and it could be used late at night. A lot of emergencies happen in the worst times. Could you address that issue, please?
Yeah, no, thank you for your question, Lisa, and that's a good one. From an AbbVie perspective, we don't know what the other uses of the emergency service personnel would be, nor can we predict those times. So I can't really give you a firm answer. That's not something that we can control. I think our commitment is we'll make this location accessible and available to any of the emergency services, whether it's, Coast Guard, Sheriff's Department, Fire Department, anybody that would need it for the beneficial use, we would make it available. But we don't know the timings of, like you say, nothing ever happens at 12 noon from a normal perspective. We understand that, but I just don't know how we can give a finite answer to that from an AbbVie perspective.
Lisa, I'm sorry. Lisa, did you have another question?
No, that's kind of it. Well, I guess I will add on since I have the opportunity to. The hospitals, Lake Forest Hospital, Conditional, Vista, they all have a heliport or a helipad, correct? Why would this be something that would be helpful to our community if it's already a need that's been met?
Yeah, they both, I think Lake Forest Hospital does have a helipad. We actually talked and met with them just to understand their operation and what they do. Under normal circumstances, and I use that word normal, I think, Lisa, that obviously that would be the location and things that would happen. We can't predict what will happen outside of normal if you had a major catastrophic incident. I'll go back to, I think it was last spring, we had the anhydrous ammonia leak up in the north side of the county. That could have been much more catastrophic. There may be needs where one hospital isn't going to be able to meet the needs of a major catastrophic incident. And in that case, this helipad would be available for other transport outside of the region where more hospitals may be needed to support that. So it's those circumstances that would be the intended use. The one-off requirement. And I think when we met with the Libertyville fire chief, if there's a significant accident, say on 137 and 43 that requires people to be transported to the hospital, you're not going to use the helipad for that because it's quicker by ambulance to get to Lake Forest Hospital. So that's not the circumstances we're talking about. I think the circumstances we're talking about would be for those major catastrophic, more significant. If I back up the clock even a little bit more, look at the flooding that Lake County had, right? What we mentioned earlier, Lake County Emergency Management has no aviation capabilities as part of our emergency planning. To understand the impact of flooding and have the ability of a helicopter to actually use that and see what the impact is, or to look for people who may be stranded or rescued. Those are those one-off scenarios that would be the intended, I think, best cases that we could predict. But again, AbbVie's not in the business of predicting when those medical situations or those emergency services would be needed or used. But again, we've opened it up. We're welcoming it to the community. I think it's a great community benefit to have that capability. And AbbVie's, footing the bill for the entire thing. No taxpayer dollars are going into that. So the community gets only the benefit and none of the cost.
Oh, unless you live next to it.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Any other questions, Lisa? Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Rohan. Was he, Rohan?
He actually, I believe he had a comment, so if we can defer him to our comment portion. We did have 2 additional questions from I apologize, I'm going to say this wrong. It's a Yi-Yun, spelled Y-I-Y-U-A-N. Her question, or his question, is what's the proposed hours of operation from Monday to Friday? And Russ stated that the use of the helipad is for business use, not for executives commuting. Are they going to disclose the usage to prove this use? If the usage is for the executives commuting, will this change the intent of the application, needing an amendment or another public hearing? From this Lake County staff perspective, we can regulate what happens, occurs on the property itself. So once the heliport leaves the site, that's not something that would be under, as far as I know, without conferring with our state attorney's office, it would not be something that would be under the purview of our authority. So that would be up to, beyond that, I'll defer it to AbbVie for how they intend to use it.
No, thank you, Kristen. I think, again, we've clarified the hours as part of the question from the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday. And like I said, this is how we would view it as a tool in our toolbox of things that we can use. AbbVie is not the type of company that's going to sit and be complacent. We want to be, as I discussed, we're in a competitive industry. We're looking for every competitive advantage we can get for how we can run our business, manage issues, and manage the responsibilities of the company. This is an enabler for us to do that.
And then we do have, I believe we're down to a Diane Salazar and a Barbara Inkman. So Diane, you put your question in the chat box, but if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sure. I actually have a couple of questions.
Okay.
With the Mario Salas inquiry, you stated that there was no study on adjacent property values, but yet you've spent an extensive amount of other studies. Is it possible to get some type of a study as to what impact this would be for the surrounding communities?
AbbVie has not done a study on the property values. We don't feel it's a negative impact to the neighborhood or toward those. And I don't know, I'm not qualified to understand what it takes to do a property study, actually.
Okay, thanks. Was there another question from?
Yes, I
Diane?
would like to know if it's possible to reduce the number of hours. You have 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Is it possible to reduce that time frame to 8 to 6 p.m.?
That's something AbbVie would not be supportive of. I think we've tried to be flexible with no weekends, and obviously, as we talked about earlier, our ability to mitigate issues that may come up and arise, we feel the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. is an appropriate time period.
I have another question with regard to the actual helicopter. The Sikorsky SK-76 is a 12 to 13 person capacity. Have you thought, since you, in all of the discussions during this session, that you're talking about 1 engineer and 1 person and possibly 2 crew people, why you need that size of an aircraft? And would you consider a smaller aircraft, again, to reduce the noise?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Kirk,
Want me to take it?
Yeah, Rick.
The Sikorsky S-76 is a fairly fast helicopter. It's probably 30 to 40 knots faster than most smaller aircraft that would have 4 or 5 seats. It's comfortable and it's capable of carrying. AbbVie's helicopter, I believe, has 8 seats. 5 seats. I'm sorry, 5 seats. So it's, yeah, that helicopter in an oil rig configuration or a military configuration is capable of carrying 12 people. This one is not. It's only set up for 5 seats.
This is Kirk. I would also say that we selected the S-76 helicopter because it has the industry-leading standard for safety. And it's also an industry-leading standard for one of the quietest helicopters out there. So we looked at that very carefully. We did look at, honestly, a smaller helicopter might, in fact, most likely would not be quieter. The S-76D is incredibly quiet helicopter.
It's also been it's a helicopter that's been around for 43 years. It has multiple backup systems in the manufacturing. It's a composite airframe. It's completely full of safety items that are mitigate anything that could go wrong with it. And most small helicopters, by the way, if you're looking at a 3 or 4 seat helicopters, are probably single engine, where the twin engine Sikorsky adds safety.
My last question has to do with, you mentioned from a safety protocols that you would only fly this in good weather condition with visual conditions only. As you know, we live in Chicago and we have a lot of wind. We have a lot of inclement weather. Are your pilots going to be instrument rated in case they get caught off guard with sudden inclement weather?
Kirk, yep. I'll take that one. This is Kirk. Yes, I would really like to stress that first of all, we're going to operate this helicopter with 2 qualified ATP rated pilots. They'll both be instrument rated pilots. They'll both have gone to Flight Safety International every 6 months to train in instrument meteorological conditions. The Flight Safety International is just world renowned for their that's the gold standard for flight safety and training. And we're going to go every 6 months. The helipad itself, though, we're going to treat it as only a visual approach and departure helipad. So if we won't be flying in instrument conditions and in or out of that helipad. I just want to make sure that that's.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diane. Did I hear Barbara was up next? Was that right?
Yes, am I unmuted now?
You're unmuted. We can hear you, Barbara. Go right ahead.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to first state that my home is located in the sanctuary home development, which is as the helicopter may fly 3,000 feet from the proposed heliport. And I'm one of 177 homes in the sanctuary development, which are all located within the village of Lake Bluff. On the AbbVie narrative document that was presented as part of the application, as well as in slide number 4, regarding just the presentation, my home was shown just to the east of all of those maps. So when AbbVie presented the lack of impact to area residences, if you were to just zoom out slightly, my home in the neighborhood of 177 homes would have been clearly shown. To me, one of the biggest questions is how have the number of residences that will be impacted factored into this decision-making matrix that was created to evaluate. It's been stated over and over again that they've chosen what they feel is a very safe and most effective location for their use. However, there are other locations that would have less impact on residences, and some on their own property, perhaps some of the soccer fields that were mentioned nearby. And so it seems to me like in that very complex matrix, you've evaluated a lot of factors, and the number of residences that are impacted has not been put high enough. And so my concern is that, how have you impacted this matrix and the decision-making process by the number of homes? Because if that were, higher in your priorities, then I don't believe this would have been the most optimal choice. That is question 1, and I'd like an opportunity for them to answer that.
Sure. Thank you, Barbara. It's Russ. As we talked about earlier, when we looked at our site selection, we evaluated, alternative locations, whether it be our site in North Chicago, whether it be the site north of Abbott Park. The current one is clearly the one we feel is the safest, the most effective, as we've discussed. I think we chose to operate it from an FAA perspective, meaning that we didn't have to choose to make it an FAA approved site. We didn't have to do the noise study. We didn't have to do the air study if we didn't make it FAA approved. We've chosen that because we think it's the right thing to do. And I think we've shown through the data, through our application, that the impact to that area is not considered impactful. It's negligible. And the noise, the air, the studies have actually concluded that. And we feel that's the best location for AbbVie from that perspective.
For AbbVie, yes. Also, in the discussion earlier, there were a number of concerns regarding limitation in terms of the traffic volume, in terms of noise, and there really was no response to this concern. It was a response of, trust me, we've put this in the application. And I think that as a zoning board, that there needs to be something in place that is written, that's documentable, that's verifiable. And so board and AbbVie, I would challenge you to make a response to this concern that is more than trust me, and that would somehow document and then prove on an ongoing basis what it is that you are actually doing.
Very good.
I can tell you from a board comment, I'm happy to respond to that, Barbara, too, that we do and we have in the past put on stipulations, and I think that is a good point, that if this was to pass, that those stipulations be incorporated in there, so there is some enforcement teeth there and something we can go back to too. I don't know if AbbVie has a comment on that, Russ. Or...
No, thank you, Chairman. I think, as we stated in the remarks, and again, we're willing to abide by the staff recommendations that was presented by Krista and the team earlier on the number of usage and flights, and that's something we're willing to commit to.
Sounds good, thank you. Barbara, do you have any other questions?
I do. I guess I still didn't see in that response something that amounted to documented proof of what actually happened, and I would request that the board somehow incorporate that. And finally, it's also sounded like the board was waiting for complaints to be the indicator of issues. And that doesn't seem like a very good, positive way to monitor what's actually happening. And I would just again request that, do you feel that this is the best way to monitor what's actually happening? And at the cost of, what is the problem being solved here? What is the problem being solved? The problem being solved appears to be convenience. And what is the cost? And to whom? I am the person, one of many, that this will cost something. All of the people who are receiving this benefit at absolutely no cost, potential entities like hospitals or some safety issue comes up, all of them are going to write letters of support because there is no cost. So what is the problem that's being solved, and what is the cost?
Russ, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I don't think I can make any more comments, and I've already completed through our remarks, through our other questions. I feel I've answered that sufficiently.
Sounds good. Barbara, any other questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments. I did have a request from staff, and we've been going at this now for a little while, to make a 5-minute break. So we are going to have a break, if that's okay, for about 5 minutes. Once we come back, it'll be open up for comments from the public, both for and against. And out of respect for those folks that have been on the line this entire time, we do have a lot of written comments for or against that staff is going to read into the record. But I'm going to go ahead and let those folks that are on either Zoom or on the phone make their comments first. So if you need to do something else, you don't have to stick around, and then we'll have the other comments read into the record. So I'm going to say we'll get back together, take a 5-minute break. We'll come back at 3:40 if that's okay. That'll give us a little over. So 3:40, and we'll have a 5-minute break if that's okay right now.
And just to clarify, everybody, if they just leave their, put yourself on mute, maybe stop your video, but please leave your the Zoom app open, and then return at, like Greg said, at 3:40.
Absolutely. Sounds good. We'll see you in about 5 minutes. Thanks. We will go ahead and come back in session, and I will turn it back to staff. Staff, if there's folks that are online that wanted to make comments either for or against this application, I would ask that we let them in first, and then we'll go through the written comments later, just out of respect for everybody's time. So, Chris, I'll turn it back over to you, I think.
Thank you. Actually, I'm sorry to delay that, but Teddy Santos, he's wanted to ask a question, so I want to make sure he had the opportunity to ask his question.
Okay,
Teddy, are you on? I don't hear from him. We can always come back when we go back to public comment. So
I can see, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I can, oh, there you go. You're off mute now, ma'am.
Oh, whoops, I forgot to unmute myself.
No, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, yes. Hi, my name is Teddy Santos. So I also live in the sanctuary and was also curious as to the flight plan in regards to not only the sanctuary, but the senior living community that abuts up right next to the proposed site. And I don't know if you guys have also considered the other apartments and townhouses that are on north of us on Waukegan Road that are right across from the AbbVie property. And I know you had talked about the flights. Now, I had read that there is a, if you fly after a certain time, there's supposed to be a noise level reduction. Would you be following those guidelines?
So thank you for your question. I think from a time period, we've already kind of established, we would abide by the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Established period that we put into our application. I think your concern or your question regarding the property, the sanctuary, and the other apartments that would be to the north of that, in the maps and in the drawings that we've shown our flight pathways coming from the northwest or the southwest. And as Kirk, our head aviation director, stated, we have no intention of ever flying over those properties that are on Waukegan Road. That is not part of the standard flight pathway that we've set up, or would be the remedy for us going forward. So we do not see that as a location where we'd fly the helicopter over that.
What about the senior living complex that's basically right in front of that Knollwood Fire Department? I mean, I feel like there are other sites that could have been used that are less residential. And with you're saying that, oh, it's going to be good for the emergency services, you also have to consider that there's a helipad at Lake Forest Hospital and Condell. So, and as far as doing a test flight, you could still fly the helicopter over, but you could find somewhere else to land, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think again, whether it's the sanctuary or any other locations right there, all of our approaches would be coming from the west. We don't have any approaches that would come from the east, and would never have the helicopter over Waukegan Road or any of that corridor. Everything's coming from the tollway to the east into the helipad.
And would you be willing to do a test flight, even if you don't have your helipad, if you could still land somewhere else, just so we can get an idea of the sound levels?
Yeah, I don't think AbbVie would be committing into do any test flight in an open field that doesn't have the helipad in it right now.
Okay.
Part of the concern also from the county standpoint is it's not an approved use yet. So I'm not sure how they could do a test flight without being approved for it.
I just have one last question is for the board. I guess this is more, when you talk about the conditional permit, is there a expiration date on this? Is it only good because you call it a conditional permit? Is there a date that, like, say, okay, your permit is good for so many years?
That has not been something we've considered yet. It's something the board certainly could consider. AbbVie has not requested. I don't know if they'd want to move through if we put a sunset clause on it or made them come back again. So that would be something that could be discussed, but not something that's currently being contemplated.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Thank you for your questions. All right, Krista, that'll close out questions here.
Yeah.
Let's move on to statements and comments of those that are online now.
Yes, so yeah, and we're going to pull out the people who are, like you said, who are in attendance and allow them to speak first. So I will call on you by name. And once we get through the verbal comments, then we'll move into our written comments. So the first person we have up, and again, we're going to try and limit these to these comments to 3 minutes per person. So I'm going to start my timer at the beginning of each. So the first person we have up on deck is Kevin Considine. So Kevin, if you can respond and let me know when you're ready, we'll get that clock started for you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Krista. Good afternoon. I'm
Go
Kevin.
ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I'm Kevin Considine. I'm the president and CEO of Lake County Partners. We are the nonprofit economic development corporation for Lake County. And I appreciate the opportunity, frankly, the thorough discussion of this topic, as well as the opportunity to share a few thoughts on the Lake County economy and the importance of the life sciences sector. So life sciences is our single largest business sector with over 120 companies, including 10 corporate headquarters, driving over $85 billion in global sales. And if you look at Chicagoland as a whole, there are about 50,000 life science jobs in all of Chicagoland. Nearly 40,000 of those are in Lake County. And as was mentioned earlier, AbbVie is our largest private employer at now 14,000 employees. Tremendous growth over the last handful of years. It's no surprise, I think, to anybody here that Lake County is in an extremely competitive situation to attract and retain key employers. And life sciences is literally the #1 most competitive industry nationwide. If you look at just about any regional plan across the country, life sciences is on it. Our toughest competitors are the Boston, Cambridge area, Northern New Jersey, the San Francisco Bay Area, and San Diego, to name a few, Research Triangle in North Carolina, et cetera. So as the local, national, and frankly, even global competition for these, whether it's a headquarters, R&D labs, or manufacturing facilities, as that competition heats up, and importantly, as the industry consolidates, so the Allergan acquisition was mentioned earlier as well, we want to ensure that that growth happens here and not in Northern New Jersey. And particularly when one buys another, we want that to happen here and not New Jersey or Boston. In order to do that, it's imperative that we have the assets in place to keep and grow those partners. So convenient access to efficient transportation, especially general aviation, is really critical. As was mentioned in many cases in the competitive markets of companies of this size, and specifically in life sciences, those companies have helicopters in their corporate fleets. And so this proposed helipad is right in line with that competitive requirement. Beyond that, we've had lots of discussion about the potential public safety impact. So from that standpoint, it's a terrific potential asset. So given all this and the discussion earlier today, I hope the board will approve this conditional use permit for this, what I believe is this important asset. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for the comments too. Next up, Krista.
Yep, sorry, I'm just getting my clock reset here. Okay, next up we have Mr. Collins from Northwestern Medicine. Mr. Collins, are you on?
I am on. Thank you, Krista. Can you
Go
hear
ahead.
me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you. On behalf of Northwestern Medicine Lake Forest Hospital, I'd like to thank the chairman and the members of the Lake County Zoning Board of Appeals for the opportunity to speak in support of the proposed helipad site. Northwestern Medicine shares with AbbVie the mission to improve health. As an organization of direct care providers, we're grateful for the life science advances AbbVie has provided, which have resulted in advanced therapeutics that we can offer our patients, improving their quality of life and their expected survival rates. Lake Forest Hospital is supportive of AbbVie's proposed helipad for several reasons. First, We participate with many organizations in the coordinated planning for large-scale emergencies at the regional and county levels. We understand that AbbVie has offered a memorandum of understanding to the Lake County Emergency Management Agency, allowing access to the proposed helipad for large-scale emergency response. It is important to recognize that in a large-scale emergency, it is likely that patients would need to be both brought into our hospital and also airlifted to regional tertiary care centers outside of Lake County. Having access to the proposed helipad would increase our capacity to transport patients both inbound and outbound for life-saving trauma and tertiary care. Our second reason for supporting the proposed helipad is that it would provide important redundancy for our helipad, where none currently exists. Having an accessible helipad within a very short distance would provide a backup in an unlikely circumstance that ours would be unavailable. As a healthcare organization, we provide direct patient care and also work within our community to address factors that contribute to better health. In addition to having access to high quality healthcare and making healthy lifestyle choices, research in the last decade has provided enhanced evidence for what we intuitively know to be true, that having access to a good paying job with health benefits contributes directly to the health of individuals. Having AbbVie as a large employer in Lake County community helps address one of the key social determinants of health, employment. We recognize the complexity of leading a complex organization that shares our dedication to health and support AbbVie's proposal as it will facilitate their continued pursuit of life science advances in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
Next up, we will have Deb Ozak on behalf of Mayor Leanne Rockingham in the city of North Chicago.
Hi, I'm ready to go.
Okay, go ahead, please.
All right. So I'm speaking on behalf of Mayor Rockingham. He's with Senator Johnson right now in City Hall. So after my comments, I'm going to take off and join them. But from what's been relayed to us in our studies here at the city, we find no issue with this project or site and its location off Atkinson Road. Many of the questions posed today, such as the number of flights and noise and road use and so on, were the same questions that we asked during our meetings with AbbVie, and we found their answers to us to be satisfactory. As stated in AbbVie's presentation and in the letters that we submitted, we're committed to working with AbbVie for the necessary permits. North Chicago and AbbVie work together on several initiatives, and we are all gratitude for this partnership. Our most recent work has to do with public safety technology that's been deployed in the city. This helipad could also serve as a possible enhancement to our public safety toolbox in a disaster or severe emergency situation. We completely understand the competitive nature of their highly regulated business. We want AbbVie to succeed and grow. So in short, if this helps them, and as stated in the letters written by various North Chicago officials, we support this project without reservation. And I want to thank you all for listening to my comments. And off I go.
Thank you. Next up, we have Lisa Spano. Let me get my contact.
In interest of saving time, I also have a written statement, so I will pass speaking.
Okay, very good, thank you. Next up is Dino Ferretti. I apologize for all my pronunciations of names today. Do we have a Mr. or Mrs. Ferretti on the line? Okay, I'm not hearing. We can come back to that one. We have a request from Rajan Mehta.
Hi, this is Rajan Mehta. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, fantastic. We live in the same neighborhood as Barbara, and we live in, we have the same concerns. She expressed them very well. So we're across from Abbott House in the village of Lake Bluff Sanctuary. We have 177 homes here, and AbbVie did not inform us of this helipad. Neither, I believe, that they informed very many of the apartment buildings next to us, is what I'm gathering here. We found out about it yesterday through social media. We're really concerned about the noise and the safety that there would be as a result of this helipad being so close to this residential homes here. And we really do not see a need for it. We feel it is of no benefit to the community. It is just a convenience for AbbVie with a negative impact to the homeowners. And that's all I'd like to say. Thanks for your consideration. I'm done.
Okay,
Great, thank you.
So again, I had stated we had a request to speak from Dino Ferretti, but he did submit some comments. So I'm just going to go ahead and read that, and then we'll go ahead and move on with the rest of the written comments. So Mr. Ferretti states, heliports should be on other properties that are more distant from residential neighborhoods. We should not have to deal with the noise. 2 round trips can turn into 6 to 8 or more daily. Executives can buy home, take train, or drive. Why should we cater to him? The next comment is from Lisa Markarian. Dear Lake County Zoning Board of Appeals, my residence is within 1.5 miles of the proposed private heliport site. Having resided at this residence since July of 1994, I am very concerned about the negative environmental impact of AbbVie's proposal. This neighborhood, which is in close proximity, is an extension of the Middle Fork Savannah. It is characterized by beautiful oak trees, an abundance of wildlife, and a sense of serenity found normally only in a country setting. My neighbors and I love the outdoors and many activities characteristic of outdoor living. You will see beautiful gardens, people walking, and an appreciation of nature. Just this spring, I was fortunate to have blue buntings, Baltimore Orioles, and red-headed woodpeckers adorn my feeders. I have spotted hawks and bald eagles in the area. All of these species would be threatened and disturbed by the construction of the heliport. As someone who resides within close proximity to the electrical power lines, I know that the helicopter would be loud and disrupt the quiet of the neighborhood. Each spring, the electrical company sends a helicopter out to check for tree growth, which may be interfering with the efficiency of the lines. Within my home, with the windows closed, I can hear the helicopter approaching 5 minutes before it is near my property. It is loud and disturbing. I can't even imagine how disruptive this would be 4 times a day or more. As a small AbbVie stockholder, I am dismayed that AbbVie would consider constructing a heliport so close to a neighborhood. In addition, with your daycare center situated across the street from the proposed site, I would be concerned about the health and well-being of the children and staff in attendance. The Abbott property is extensive. Is there not a location within the perimeters of the property that would not impact neighboring communities? Please reconsider the development of the heliport on this site. It will be disturbing to the neighborhood and the surrounding community. The next comment we have is from Mary Ellen and Dean Snyder. We are concerned homeowners writing to object to the proposed, we are the concerned homeowners writing to object to the proposed AbbVie heliport site, which is about 1.5 miles from our property. One of the main reasons we chose this location for our forever home was the natural beauty, peacefulness, and quiet of the neighborhood. We are retirees and spend most of our time at home. We are convinced that the heliport site will severely impact us and the serenity of our neighborhood. We are also concerned about the environmental impacts on wildlife, air quality, and negative effects to our property value. We have experienced the impact of a helicopter flying over our neighborhood. Every year, the power company sends a helicopter to inspect the lines. It is extremely loud and unnerving when this happens. We are angry at the thought that our home will be in the AbbVie helicopter flight path, and we might have to endure such disruptions multiple times a day or week. One of us is a former Abbott employee, and we are both stockholders. We are familiar with the AbbVie campus and question why another location can't be used, such as one closer to Route 137 and I-294. We strongly urge the zoning board to deny AbbVie's request or ask them to change the proposed location. The next comment is from Hugh and Marjorie Triplett. We are writing in response to your recent notice regarding the request for a heliport to be located at 13394 West Atkinson Road in Libertyville. We live a short distance from the subject property and we do not desire to have a heliport in this location. We object to all the noise, we object to the noise as well as the safety factor in positioning this port in a heavily populated area. We have lived in our home for over 60 years and have seen our neighborhood increase substantially over the years with family-friendly homes. Knollwood has a very safe and family-friendly environment. We certainly do not want to change that. We also believe a heliport would damage our property value. Within the past 2 years, a new senior living facility was built off of Atkinson Road on Waukegan Road. I know the noise would certainly be a detriment to those residents as well. We respectfully reject the permit request to allow private heliport on the aforementioned property. The next comment is from Tracy Miller, excuse me. I am writing in response to the request for a helipad next to the Libertyville Fire Station 3 on Atkinson Road. I want to point out 4 major areas of concern I have with this project: privilege, a good neighbor, COVID-19, and personal impact. With all the unrest in the world and major discussions about racial inequality and privilege, I don't see it as a good business plan or a project for the county to endorse, to flaunt a company's wealth so that a select few, the privileged, can utilize a helicopter for commuting. We all know this helipad is mainly for a few AbbVie executives so they can reduce their commute time. The proposal states most days we expect 2 round-trip uses on average, round trip defined as 1 landing and 1 takeoff during standard business hours, being from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. These times exactly coincide with the average commuting hours. This helipad is being built so a select few AbbVie executives can use it for their own personal commute and save 40 minutes a day. Per MapQuest, 20 minutes each way to go 11 miles to and from Waukegan Airport. If their commute is too long, I suggest they invest in the town/community AbbVie resides by purchasing housing there. There are plenty of options extremely close to AbbVie. Right across the street, there are condos, townhouses, houses, and apartments. Executive officers make enough money to have the luxury of owning multiple properties, unlike the average worker. For most people, if they want to keep their job, they would have to move closer to their company, and if their company moves after they bought their property, they would be required to move again. Also, sometimes workers cannot even afford the housing next to their work, forcing them to deal with long commute times. If AbbVie executives put effort, not just words, into knowing what the average worker, even workers at AbbVie, must endure, it might give them a better understanding of their privilege and how their decisions impact others. If AbbVie wants to help with the social injustice and unrest, instead of just talking about privilege, diversity, and inclusivity, I suggest they start practicing what they preach instead of flaunting their own privilege. We are currently in the middle of a pandemic with COVID-19, a respiratory disease that mainly impacts the lungs. While this is currently happening, AbbVie is requesting a project that would add more emissions into the air immediately next to the neighborhoods with families who may already be dealing with lung issues, and this will just add to their problems. I don't see adding a helipad when it is not necessary as being acceptable given the current global situation. In the proposal, I saw a lot of mentioning AbbVie being a good neighbor. However, I don't see that. I don't understand how spending money on a non-essential like a helipad during a pandemic is considered being a good neighbor. There are thousands of people out of work and AbbVie wants to spend money on a helipad so a few executives can reduce their commute time. Let's remember that right now, many people would love any commute time. They would love to just have a job. There are thousands of people who have lost their jobs, stores, and livelihoods. Maybe AbbVie, the good neighbor, should take their extra money and instead of spending it on a non-essential project, they should investigate, and that's 3 minutes. Moving on to the next comment. It's from Keith Hansen. The following are my public comments regarding the proposed private heliport. My name is Keith Hansen. I am representing myself. The conditional use permit PDF that is available on the Lake County website states the following. The character of the neighborhood. While there are residential areas further east, there is a densely forested tree and shrub area as a buffer zone, which is on page 9 of the application, page 9 of 162. I live in that residential area, which is unincorporated Lake Bluff, including portions of Libertyville and Shields Township. The area is extremely quiet and semi-rural. No matter how AbbVie attempts to mitigate the noise of a heliport, the construction of that heliport will change the character of our neighborhood forever. According to the CEP, total operations are projected to be an astounding annual total of 1,144. While the forested tree and shrub area may mitigate the visual effects of the heliport, it can do little to mitigate the noise. There are houses just to the east of the proposed heliport location. For those residents, the 1,000 plus heliport events per year would be excruciating. Even residents such as myself who live somewhat further away will be adversely impacted by noise pollution, regardless of how efficient AbbVie claims its helicopters to be. Therefore, I ask the Board of Appeals to decline AbbVie's request to build the heliport. If the executives of AbbVie wish to earn the goodwill of the neighboring community, they should drive to Waukegan Airport to use their helicopter. An airport is a suitable location for helicopters, not our neighborhood. At the very least, I ask the Board of Appeals to impose careful restrictions on the number of heliport events per year to reduce them far below the projected total of 1,144. Personally, I believe that just one landing and one takeoff per weekday is a reasonable limitation. Thank you for your consideration. The next comment is from Anthony Vega from the Lake County Sheriff's Office. On behalf of Sheriff John D. Eidelberg and the Lake County Sheriff's Office, I am submitting the statement in support of AbbVie's application to build a heliport adjacent to their headquarters on Atkinson Road. This asset will serve AbbVie's operational purposes, but will also serve as a crucial resource for law enforcement and first responders during a critical incident. As the largest law enforcement agency in Lake County, our statutory obligation is to ensure that Lake County is prepared for any significant disaster that may occur. Given the current national landscape where unforeseen and unpredictable incidents can happen anywhere at any time, having access and the ability to use AbbVie's HeliStop will enable law enforcement to respond immediately should the need arise. AbbVie's commitment to the Lake County community and to the needs of first responders is a prime example of a private-public partnership. This opportunity will increase emergency response and will be a crucial asset in Lake County. Our office looks forward to this project's process, and the Lake County Sheriff's Office commends AbbVie for their commitment to Lake County and their dedication to public safety. The next comment is from, excuse me, sorry, I've got to reset the clock here. Next comment is from Mike and Joanne Whalen. We are requesting that the County Zoning Board of Appeals rejects AbbVie Aviation's LLC's request of a conditional use permit to allow private heliport at Atkinson Road. The negative impact of having a heliport at this location would be substantial on many nearby residents of Lake County and Lake Bluff, ours being one of them. We live 2,400 feet as the crow flies from the proposed helipad location, and we will be impacted. The closest resident would be just over 1,570 feet away. They will be impacted. No one wants to be woken at 7 a.m. to the sound of helicopters, nor do we want to hear them in the evening when we are outside enjoying a dinner with our family. If we lived next to a hospital and this heliport was for life-saving measures, we think it would be something that we would not only expect but understand. However, having helicopters bring in employees, visitors, or stockholders in no way should be allowed over our peaceful enjoyment of our homes and properties. The request stated that this would also be allowed to be used as backup for life-saving transportation. However, in the 55 years that Joanne has lived in Knollwood, she has seen, if memory serves her correctly, one flight for life transport, and with Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital within 2 miles, we already have the capacity for these flights. The one flight we mentioned landed at the previous West Elementary School, and a flight could still land there today if it was necessary. So this noted add-on benefit isn't a benefit at all. In the AbbVie Aviation information packet, they provided letters of support from the fire chief of the city of North Chicago, Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital, etc. However, not one of these parties will be negatively impacted by this heliport, but a whole neighborhood will be impacted with a high probability of decreased property values and noise for up to 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. With all the properties that AbbVie owns, which are adjacent to their campus, why would they choose the one piece closest to their residences? They could build it on Abbott property on the north side of 137 between Route 43 and the Tri-State Tollway. They could build it on the north side of 137 just across the street from North Chicago Fire Department and not have a residence within the same distance as currently proposed. They could build it on top of one of their many buildings on their campus and be significantly further away from the residential areas. As the board, I believe your mission is to decide if the use will be in the public's interest, not the interest of a single entity or person. In our opinion, and that of most of our neighbors, this conditional use will not be in the public's interest. We ask you to please reject this request. The next question is from a UMM Schabacher Koppel. I am worried about your plans to allow a new heliport on Atkinson Road for numerous reasons. To mention a few, number one, the proposal is completely contrary to the Lake County Net Zero greenhouse gas emission resolution of September 9th, 2020, as helicopters pollute substantially more than other transportation modes. A helicopter produces 950 pounds of dioxide per hour, whereas a car produces 22 pounds per hour. An idling helicopter equals 42.5 cars idling outside your window. A helicopter uses 88 gallons of fuel per hour. Number two, I am a resident of Lake Forest. I have previously lived in Princeton, New Jersey, where we lived the same distance from a local helipad operated by a big pharmaceutical company. The nuisance and noise brought onto our neighbor communities, schools, and childcare centers were tremendous. Several news stories on the East Coast called it a plague destroying peaceful communities. Number three, the proposed operation hours are outside of the noise ordinance codes in the communities that will be affected. So tax-paying contractors cannot start operating, but a noisy helicopter will be allowed to spew more noise over more houses outside of quiet hours. Further, most local high schools currently only start session at 9 a.m. and students really need that sleep rather than being woken by an executive that wants to cut 15 minutes out of his morning commute. A study released by Institute for Families Studies and the Wheatley Institution this week of teens' mental health during COVID-19 points to that teens, in fact, are doing mentally better during quarantine than before, partially because they can sleep. Number four, time and again, helicopter crashes have proven that increased transportation by helicopter is neither safe for the passengers, crew, or people on the ground. Have you considered the risk of an accident? A helicopter crashing in a residential community or on a school is very high. Data shows that helicopter crashes are pretty stable at approximately 120 per year, in spite of newest technology, as it seems that the number one cause of helicopter crashes are human error. Although the fatality risk for passengers of a helicopter is slightly lower than for cars, the cleanup and effect on communities after a helicopter crash is much higher. A crash utilizes expensive emergency services, which the taxpayers will pay for. Number five, according to Yale Climate Connections, we also should be worried not just about the regular carbon emissions, but of the especially problematic aviation emissions. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change points out that aviation emissions include water vapor, which creates clouds and releases of ample black carbon, nitrous oxide, and sulfur oxide. These in turn contribute even more to the greenhouse effect and the trapping of heat. Number six, impact of more helicopters in our community will negatively impact children of Lake County. Several studies show that excessive helicopter noise can lead to slower brain development in children and eventual brain damage. It also impairs memory and cognitive abilities. Is that what we want for Lake County residents? Number seven, noise pollution. So that was 3 minutes for that comment.
Krista?
Yes.
I apologize if I interrupt for just a second. I know you're reading comments, but Member Rummel would like to make a comment and he has to excuse himself shortly.
Please go ahead, Member Rummel.
Thank you for giving me the time. I just wanted to make a comment that we talked a lot about notification, and I want to thank AbbVie for being so upfront and notifying us. They did notify all the board members. My first action was to notify Knollwood neighbors because they were the closest one, and the organization I knew that would be in my district, which was the Knollwood area. So they did keep us informed as to what they were doing, and I do want to thank them for that. Having sat on partners for 6 years, we do respond to the needs of businesses, and AbbVie was also a big driver in creating a reverse commute train out of Lake Forest that puts 3 express trains on in the afternoon to help their employees get there. So the question that when I was mayor of Lake Forest that we had to ask, and a question I'm asking here is that when they built Lake Forest Hospital, a lot of people didn't want to see that happen, but the question is progress and us supporting businesses within the community. That's a question that we have to ask ourselves on a global basis. Do we wish to support them? I don't think we can judge what they need to be successful. I think they can judge that. And if they're willing to put the money forth to be successful, I think we should be supporting them. So that was my comment. Thank you for giving me the time.
Very good. Thank you, Member Rummel. I'm going to go back to reading the comments. The next one we have on the list is from.
All right, 150 even, we're good. Thank you.
I'm sorry, the next one we have is from Tim Flente, F-L-E-N-T-Y-E. I am writing to request that you defer approval of a conditional use permit until AbbVie meets with the community. preferably with you serving as facilitators. The meeting would be, and that's directed to the board. The meeting would be focused on problems at one of its other locations, the North Chicago plant located at 1400 Sheridan Road in North Chicago. In essence, I am asking you to treat AbbVie as you would any other entity, such as a tavern, which is opening a new location. It seems unlikely that you would grant an owner a license for a new location if the first tavern were creating demonstrable problems within its community. How can we trust AbbVie to be a responsible neighbor in Libertyville if, for decades, it has not been a good neighbor in North Chicago? For years, many of us have noticed a foul odor being emitted by the plant in question, where I believe AbbVie manufactures erythromycin for one of its ingredients or derivatives. As long ago as 1972, a resident of North Chicago won a lawsuit in the Illinois Supreme Court, Schatz v. Abbott Laboratories Incorporated, against AbbVie, Abbott at the time. Mr. Schatz complained of a noxious odor affecting both his movie theater business as well as his ability to enjoy his home. And yet AbbVie has continued to pollute for decades, shielded by its financial resources and cadre of attorneys. When members of the community have contacted AbbVie about the odor, the company denies it is aware of any problems. Of course, this claim defies credulity, if only because the company has lost a lawsuit over this very issue. I am hoping that we use this moment when the community has some leverage over AbbVie to compel the company to meet with community members as well as the Illinois EPA. Even if I haven't noticed an odor in Knollwood, I have smelled the noxious odor at 1400 Sheridan Road on 80% of the days I have driven by the facility. I suspect that a change or stoppage in production occurred on the other 20% of the days. There have been complaints from Libertyville, Lake Bluff, and Gurnee as well. It all depends on atmospheric conditions and which way the wind is blowing.
Krista, can I interrupt you for just a second? This
Yep.
one, if they continue on this one isn't really germane to the topic at hand. So if they continue, if they have anything else about the heliport, I'd include it, but otherwise I put that one to the side.
Other than they just risk that you defer approval of this application until parties can meet on North Chicago. So
Great, thanks.
I'll move on to the next one. This is from Stephanie Klein. I am writing in response to the petition for a conditional use permit to allow a private heliport. I am strongly opposed to this proposal. I reside less than 1 mile from the proposed building site. On occasion, there are helicopters flying in my immediate vicinity, presumably as part of exercises conducted from the naval base. When this occurs, it is loud and very disruptive to the extent that it has woken my small child. However, this is tolerable given the sporadic frequency with which this occurs, as well as the fact that it is for the benefit of our national security. Given that there are no true noiseless helicopters, the additional helicopter traffic in this area would increase the level of noise in this area, particularly since helicopters would be landing and taking off from the heliport instead of just passing over the area. This could possibly result in a level of noise above what the EPA considers acceptable in terms of not contributing disruption to normal human activities. While noise measurement is complex, the fact that helicopter traffic in this area will contribute additional noise pollution to our community is straightforward. Furthermore, although this does not impact me directly, this disruption would be even greater to those in the neighboring senior living residents. Second, while the helipad would presumably be permitted for non-AbbVie use, this provides little to no value for our community as there are already heliports in the area that serve emergency needs, including nearby Lake Forest Hospital. Finally, to build a heliport, particularly in this area, demonstrates poor environmental stewardship. There are many protected spaces in the immediate vicinity on which the noise and emissions could have a negative impact. In closing, I urge you to strongly consider the impact of this proposal on the community, particularly when weighed against whatever pressing business concerns occur within a 400-mile radius. For example, is providing an expeditious commute from downtown Chicago or O'Hare for an executive worth the disruption to our community and environment? While population growth has naturally added congestion and noise to what is a relatively peaceful area, purposefully inducing a source such as helicopter traffic would be detrimental to the value of our community. Thank you for your consideration of these comments. Next comment comes from, and again, I'm going to mispronounce this, so I apologize, Ludmila Epstein, E-P-S-H-T-E-Y-N. We live on Sanctuary Lane and we think it's too close and will be too noise whole day, if it 3 to 4 times a day. The next comment is from Kelly Kowalski. In regards to a request for a private heliport by AbbVie, I, Kelly Kowalski, do not support this request. As a homeowner and mother of young children in the northwest area of Knollwood, this will cause increased noise, disturbance, and impact the value of my home. I oppose AbbVie's request. Next comment comes from Steve Kowalski. This is to confirm that I, Steve Kowalski, do not support this request. As a homeowner and father of 3 young children in the northwest area of Knollwood, this would cause increased noise disturbance and negatively impact the value of our home. The next statement is taken from the comments we received from Carolyn Lisco and Lester Weborg. We strongly urge the board to vote against allowing Atkinson North Chicago LLC to develop any property as an airport for helicopters or otherwise changing the land use from residential farming in joint partnership or contractually with AbbVie Aviation LLC. And we ask the board to consider the following factors and answer in this meeting the following questions, which were already, we already went through those questions. In closing, she states, or he states, we respectfully refer the board members to the solemn promise and commitment by the board to protect the residential property owners from further commercial development in this area that dates back to the expansion of Route 43. Please discuss and address this commitment.
Krista, yes. I apologize. I think you just read something from Catherine Litsko.
Yes.
She has also raised her hand that she would like to speak.
Okay. Since I'm in the middle of comments, please remind me to.
I'll remind you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next comment we have was submitted by Bridget Everson on behalf of State Representative Daniel Dinich. Daniel Dinich stated in his letter, dear ZBA, this letter is in regards to item 6.1 on this week's Zoning Board of Appeals agenda, which would grant a conditional use permit to allow a private helipad at 13394 West Atkinson Road. I was recently contacted by several constituents who live in close proximity to the proposed helipad. They expressed to me significant concerns that if approved, the increased noise and pollution caused by the helipad would negatively impact their quality of life. These concerns are echoed in the staff report produced by the Lake County Department of Planning, Building, and Development, which states that the nearby residential neighborhood is of the greatest concern with regards to any negative land use impacts specifically related to lighting, noise, and air pollution. If this conditional use permit is approved, the nearby residents will be among the most impacted, and they are the party that is by far the most likely to incur significant negative effects of this project. These residents are critical stakeholders in this matter, and they deserve to have their perspective given commensurate weight to the decision made on this application. Therefore, I respectfully urge you to have a dialogue with the residents, work with them to determine whether additional conditions will fully mitigate the potential negative impacts, and weigh their good faith concerns before you determine whether to grant this conditional use permit. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration of this matter and your attention to the concerns of the impacted residents. Then we have comments from Barbara Ankman. Dear Lake County Zoning Board of Appeals, I am trustee for the Village of Lake Bluff and have resided at 29, I'm going to skip over her address for security purposes, in Lake Bluff for 25 years. Late in the evening of November 9th, I was first made aware of the November 10th Lake County Zoning Board of Appeals meeting to review case CUP 0005844-2020, the requested action to approve a conditional use permit for the private heliport. I want to register my objection to the approval of the site at 13394 East Atkinson Road, Libertyville, Illinois, based on the close proximity to residences, the lack of demonstration of due diligence to pursue alternative locations with less residential impact, the lack of limits placed on traffic volume, and the lack of reporting required for actual traffic. My home is located as a helicopter may fly 3,000 feet from the proposed heliport location. I am one of 177 homes in the sanctuary development, all located within the village of Lake Bluff. As documented in the map parcels that received mailings about this potential heliport, both my home and the other homes in my neighborhood were excluded from this important dissemination of information. I understand only after briefly reviewing the 163-page conditional use permit application, 16 pages of project drawings, 3 pages of zoning hearing maps, and 10-page summary letter from the chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals that I believe she's referring to the staff report, that significant time and money has been invested in the current proposed site location. What I am reasonably requesting is the following. The zoning board should delay any potential approval of this request until the applicant demonstrates their due diligence by researching alternatives to this location with less impact to residential neighbors. Number 2, the zoning board should require the applicant to limit the flight traffic volume, as there appears to be no limits placed on the applicant at this time. Number 3, the zoning board should require the applicant to track, report, and limit the actual patterns of arrivals and departures of helicopter traffic to assess the impact of these flights on adjacent residential properties. And please find below an excerpt from the AbbVie Heliport narrative dated October 20th, 2019 that excludes my home and neighborhood. And she included some screenshots. And there was another comment received by Barbara Ankman. I am in strong objection to the location of the AbbVie helipad near to my home. This will negatively impact the quiet and peaceful enjoyment of my home, yard, and neighborhood, especially in light of the projected use of 3 to 4 times daily. I request that alternative locations be researched and presented to the board as options. The next comment we have is from Rasmus Cole. Do not establish a helicopter landing zone at AbbVie Aviation. There is already too much noise and dust in the family living areas because of the large facility of Peter Baker, not to mention their large dump trucks ruining the roads and creating traffic as well. There is the freight train tracks, which are busy every single day throughout the night, blowing the whistle before entering the tunnel and also adding to traffic during the daytime. Plus the noise from the highway is also already constantly audible. The next comment we have is from Christo Tates. This is an email for the hearing, Lake County ZBA, CUP 00584 2020. I'm very against establishing heliport so close to the residential area where people have their family homes with children and pets. There's already too much noise and dust from Highway and Peter Baker and Sons Company Asphalt Company. There are also 3 busy train tracks where true passing trains are required to blow whistle 4 times when entering the tunnel day and night. Hopefully families come before business and money. The next comment is from Paul Dunlap. We are in favor of the zoning board of approving the alternate site, not the fire station area on Atkinson Road. Locating the helipad so near to a residential area would create the frequent loud noise of helicopters taking off and landing very near to our neighborhood. It would affect quality of life and property values located so near the sanctuary homes. The next comment we have is from Colette Budvidis. I live in the sanctuary of Lake Bluff community, which includes 177 homes. We did not receive notice of the CBA meeting. Considering the homes in the sanctuary closest to Waukegan Road are less than 1/2 mile away, and the furthest is 1 mile away from the proposed helipad location, the failure to provide notice to the sanctuary should be considered a major oversight by the ZBA. It does state in the application the following municipalities are within a 1.5 mile radius of the heliport site and will receive notice to the Zoning Board of Appeals hearing: North Chicago, Libertyville, Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, Green Oaks, and Mettawa. Every one of the 177 homes in the sanctuary will be negatively impacted by the noise, light, and air pollution a helipad in this location will create. The sanctuary residents should have been given adequate notice so they had the time to research and understand the implications or benefits of a helipad in this location and had the time to provide a public comment. It is my opinion that the conditional use permit for a helipad in this location should not be approved. The location is surrounded by residential communities, and while it sounds nice on paper, there is no way to eliminate the noise, light, and air pollution a helicopter creates. Was a study done on how property values will be affected if a helipad is allowed in this location? If approved, they should be required only to use a helipad within the allowed noise ordinances of the surrounding communities and be held to the stated maximum of 2 trips per day. And then I believe, let's see, we have a comment from Yiyun. Don't see the justification for hearing this helipad in a residential area. The number of flights and the use of passenger transportation do not align with the primary business needs of meeting the supply chain challenges. The next comment, Millet, it was just put into the chat box. It was a Millet L5, I believe. If they are abiding by the flight limits, this does not match with what AbbVie previously said about possibly needing to use it for unexpected reasons, audits, etc. Then we have a comment from Elisa Spano. I am concerned about the proposed heliport on Atkinson Road. The property borders my community and is at the end of my street. This land has been used solely for agricultural use for many years. Changing this property zoning to allow a heliport would be harmful to a peaceful neighborhood. It is also across the street from a daycare center. My husband and I have owned our home in Knollwood on Quasi Avenue for 25 years. It is a family-centered community. People move to our area for large green spaces and to enjoy nature. This section of Knollwood is home to 100-year-old oak trees, native plants, and plentiful wildlife, including coyote, fox, owls, blandings, and painted turtles, and beautiful birds, including herons, egrets, red-tailed hawks, indigo buntings, orioles, hummingbirds, scarlet tanagers, and many other species. This area is an extension of the Middle Fork Savanna. According to the Lake County Forest Preserves, the preserve houses a parcel of what is considered the highest quality tallgrass savanna of its kind in the nation and is recognized as a globally threatened ecosystem. Having a heliport at the edge of our neighborhood will have a negative impact for all residents. We are concerned about noise pollution, air pollution, and light pollution. The proposed hours of operation of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. will have us waking up to the sounds of helicopters and eating our dinners to the sounds of helicopters. The specs for the helicopter mention the sound at takeoff and landing being 75 dB, which is in a range considered hazardous to humans. Air pollution is another concern. A helicopter produces 950 pounds of carbon dioxide an hour, whereas a car produces 22 pounds an hour. An idling helicopter is the same as 5 cars outside your window. Light pollution is also an issue as the proposed hours of operation includes before dawn and after dark hours. For many, our homes are the largest and sometimes our only major investment. This heliport will hurt us financially by lowering our property values and making our houses more difficult to sell. There were some questions that have already been read, so I'll move on to the remaining, her closing statement. The purpose of this heliport is to transport executives to airports and downtown. A limousine would do the same with much lower impact on the neighboring communities. Abbott owns vast stretches of land along Buckley Road and Waukegan Road that do not border residential communities or daycare facilities. It makes more sense to have the heliport there. We ask that you say no to this heliport because the lives of residents of Lake County matter. Thank you. And then we do have 3 voicemails that I received this morning that I would like to play so that they may be entered into the record. And I'm going to go ahead.
Before you do that, we do have a couple of, I know you said to wait till after you're done reading them. Do you want to finish this too, or do you want to allow comments from people who are participating live?
Let me get through the list of the 3 voicemails, and then we'll go back
okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
In the hearing.
Krista, if those are playing, we can't hear anything here.
Oh, you can't?
Nope. I thought there was a long pause there. Yeah, we can't hear anything on this end.
Okay, well, let's go back and I'll see if I can regroup and maybe figure out how to get those played. We did have those 3 voicemails. So Hannah, can you help me?
I'll do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, Chris is trying to figure that out. I did get 3 requests via chat for comments. The first is from Catherine Litzkow, I think is how you say it. Catherine, if you want to unmute yourself, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Am I unmuted?
You are. Go right ahead, Catherine. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I want to thank everybody for spending all of this time and for the moderator for taking time to take out the questions from the comments that we made. After listening to everyone, I wanted to comment regarding the time frame for action on this vote. Commenters keep saying that everyone was informed, but nobody's giving any specific dates on when they were informed. I'm not familiar with the laws about notice, but I do believe more time is needed to take a vote on this action because everybody's time frames, maybe that's just me, maybe you too, are much busier because of the pandemic. I have been doing things and taking time and having a lot less sleep than before the pandemic. I hope that you will consider that and consider whether or not there has been enough time to consider this vote. Also, I take specific issue with any comment by Mr. Rummel or any other person that would say, quote, and I can't quote, but the gist was, all I need to know is if Abbott thinks it's good, that's okay with me. That upset me a little bit to hear that. I also was upset when the board, I did not hear the board ask specifically, even if it's crude, even if it's distasteful, if a helicopter has an emergency. We're going to be around, all going up Route 94 corridor from different flight plans. If there is an emergency, were the people or the communities, or was it only IDOT that needed to approve whether a corridor around 94 needed to be approved regarding emergency landings? I have not heard anyone say specifically, and again, please excuse me if I'm being crude, the inherent risk of a crash. Nobody has mentioned that. Waukegan Airport, there is a certain buffer. I only looked it up very briefly because I was trying to educate myself in a short period of time. Please, I would like to hear a comment about that. And then just in general, I respect Abbott. I respect their pharmaceutical creativity, but I do take issue with the fact that they recognize that it's going to be a big part of it is convenience, competitive advantage.
Catherine, I'm sorry to interrupt. That's been the 3 minutes. Do we,
Thank you, Catherine. Staff, just to clarify something, I was just looking at our records here. Looks like 350 notices were sent out to residents within the, as our law defines what we have to send out to. Do you know the date that was sent out? Those notices were sent out to make them aware of this hearing? I
don't know the date off the top of my head. It was within the minimum, it was outside of the minimum 15-day window that is required by state statute. So sometime, it would take me a second to look up the exact date of when those were mailed, but it was in October.
Okay, great. No, I just looked through. It looks like about 350 people were notified. So I just wanted to make sure those went out. Great. Was there somebody else online that had comments as well?
I think we had a Dino Ferretti that wanted to speak.
Mr. Ferretti, if you're there, go ahead. We'll give you 3 minutes too.
I'm looking to see if I still see. I am not seeing, he was listed as iPhone with his name after it, and it appears as if Mr. Ferretti is no longer with us.
Okay.
And then I did confirm, just so you know, that the mailing did go out on the October 21st. It was in the mail.
Okay, October 21st. Perfect.
Okay, I think I have a way to play the voicemail messages now. So give me just a second to get those queued up. Oh, hold on. Sorry, I'm still trying to get it. Let me turn up my volume.
Can you hear that? Call this number and leave a message. And this is regarding the AbbVie helipad site. I've lived in the area for 25 years. I own a home in the sanctuary, which is a few blocks from the proposed helipad site. I'm troubled and concerned. AbbVie feels it's okay to build a helipad so close to a senior care facility and so close to a community of single-family homes and condos. We love living in this area. I walk daily. I feel connected to nature and my environment. I am concerned that the proposed helipad will disrupt nature, make us more vulnerable to unsafe noise pollution, and harm our physical and psychological health, and also reduce our home values. AbbVie needs are not greater than our needs. AbbVie is a health care company, and they should focus on the well-being of the community and come up with a plan for the good of the environment. I'm Mary Erb, and I live in the sanctuary. I do not want the helipad site approved by Lake County. Thank you. My number is 847-687.
Let's start the next one.
Hi, my name is Brianne Chooney. I'm calling about the subject Lake County ZBA number CUP 000-584-2020. I'm calling to say that I am against having the heliport put in. We have enough noise coming from Peter Baker and Son, the trains going through, as well as the highway being so close. It is already noisy over here. And I just want to say that I am against having the heliport put in. Thank you.
And finally, the last voicemail message that we received.
Hi, my name is Marquise Mister, and I'm calling about the Heliport meeting hearing, what will be taken today. The subtitle is Lake County ZBA CUP 000-584-2020, and there is no way there will be heliport built right here in the residential area. We already have train. Every time train is passing, it blows whistle 4 times during night. Also, we have asphalt factory right here, asphalt company working all day, constant noise, constant touch. And also there is highway right here with highway noise. So it's totally unthinkable that there will be a heliport. Please call me anytime, 847-208-5255.
Okay, so that was the 3 voicemails that we received. I think we've captured most everybody. Diane.
One comment. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Krista. I didn't know if you saw that message. I do believe Diana Salazar was the last person who had asked to make a comment. I do not believe we've called on her yet.
Okay, and just, we usually end at 4, so I'm going to say this will be the last public comment that we'll take at this time, and then we'll turn it back to the board since we're over 2.
Hi, this is Diana Salazar. I appreciate all of your time today to review this zoning conditional use permit and answer questions. On behalf of myself and my husband, Mario Salas, both property owners, I would like to enter our objection to this project due to 2 areas: home value diminution and quality of life. As a homeowner in the immediate area, there's no property value impact conducted as part of this proposal. And number 2, the noise nuisance impacting residents based on open-ended emergency use, which can occur at any time, day, and frequency beyond AbbVie's use. And if necessary, these other agencies may inadvertently use another flight path. We want to enter our objection. I thank you all for the consideration of this objection. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you both very much. Appreciate the comments. And Krista, thank you. You should go into speed reading. You covered those better than most would, so I appreciate that, trying to get through all those.
Yes, hopefully we have, we did have a lot of people. I'm just checking the emails to see if we've received anything additional since the hearing has started. But if you want to take it back over while I'm checking.
Okay, sounds good. With that, I'm gonna go back to the board to, based on the comments that we've had for the past several hours, I want to go back to the board members to get your feelings and opinions based on the testimony, comments, and questions we've had from public to see if all of you, number 1, are comfortable voting on this today. And if so, where your thoughts are, so we can give the applicant one chance to reply if we are going to take a vote today, to give them a chance to reply if we have any other questions. So I will start with Member Starkey and we'll work our way backwards this time. So Member Starkey, any comments, and do you want to take this up as a vote today?
Okay, thank you, everybody, for everybody's patience and listening. I just want staff to clarify. Several residents commented they didn't receive notification. And while I assume the staff did send the proper people notices, can you just go over that in this public forum?
Yes, thank you, Linda. Yeah, so we do send out notices to all the surrounding property owners that, you know, in our estimation will be impacted by the proposed use. And in doing that, obviously the adjacent properties were included, and we included those, you know, approximately within a half-mile radius, using certain geographical boundaries, you know, and taking into consideration the proposed flight paths and where the impacts would be. Those notices were sent to residences, as Hannah stated, in October. As part of that, so we have had gotten several comments today from the sanctuary residents. The HOA was included because they're the homeowners association owns property just east of Waukegan Road there, and it's my understanding that the HOA forwarded the notice to their residents last night. So that's why I think there's been some confusion and some statements from residents saying that they didn't receive a notice until last night, because that was the HOA had forwarded it to them at that time. But as Chair Kaplan stated, we did send the notice out to over, I believe it was over 330 residents, which is far more than we would normally send out for a CUP, but based on the potential impacts of this case, we recognize that we needed to go above and beyond what our normal practices are.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted that clarified and on the record on today's hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, so as I mentioned in my initial comments, I do believe that we need to somehow monitor or quantify the daily operations and limit to what's in the application. So I'm not exactly sure the logistics or how to do that, but I do think that needs to be specified. I am ready to vote on this today, and you know, a few residents mentioned, you know, that they hear the noise and disturbance from Peter Baker, the highway, and the train tracks. And to quote one of them, they said, "It's already noisy here." And considering the property is zoned LI, it's difficult to balance corporate progress and residents' needs. And I can't judge AbbVie's needs to be successful. And the way I stand now, I would be in support of this project, and I would be willing to vote on it today.
Great, sounds good. Thank you. Next up, Member Roche.
So a question that I had was, if there was to be a limit to the number of flights that could happen in a week, what would be the enforcement mechanism? Like who monitors that? How, you know, how do we enforce something? What would the penalties be? When, at what, or, you know, at one point do we tell AbbVie they have to come back and apply for, you know, an amendment to increase the numbers? I'm really kind of torn. So I would vote on it today, but I'm not sure that I'm actually really ready.
Okay. Sounds good. Member Reindl, I believe I was told had left the zoning office, so he had to head out. Member Raymond, we'll go to you for comments.
Okay, I think I'm on.
Yep, you are, Mark.
My arrow is okay. We've heard this kind of concerning expansion of development for many years, and there's a certain amount of sensitivity that I try to maintain for the concerns that are expressed. However, when the zoning was established, it was specified for this particular kind of function, and that there's a certain amount of noise that is associated with that. Therefore, I sympathize with people, but yet the owners of this land have the right to develop it. And I am not capable of understanding the business plan that Abbott has. And if they feel that it is to their advantage to have a helicopter, I would be in favor of this. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Marv. Appreciate it. Member Peterson?
Well, it's been a long afternoon, and I appreciate everybody's time in hearing from AbbVie and their spokespeople and from members of the community. And I concur with Member Raymond, and I also concur with Member Starkey in terms of trying to have some sort of report on flight operations. I highly doubt that they would go above and beyond the numbers they have in their plan, but to give some assurance to the members of the community, I think it's our responsibility as a zoning board of appeals to send a clear message to the members of the community that we care about you too. It is an L1 zoning area, and there's a train that goes by, there's construction, there's I-94, and I'm sure all your legislators have done a great job in trying to provide soundproof walls and other mitigation items. So I am prepared to vote tonight, because it is night now, and but somehow provide that caveat of a report of some sort. That's all.
Sounds good. I appreciate that. I think that is a good comment there as well, and something we can definitely incorporate into a motion if it does pass at that time. Member Hockney.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of facts we have to consider, and I'm not sure that we all have talked about what those facts are, but as I was writing things down, I agree with Marv, it is zoned industrial and all the property around it is already industrial. So that's I appreciate the work that AbbVie has done in letting us know about the environment, how that's being protected, and how whether it's regard to the maintaining just taking 1 acre out of 10, whether it has to do with the wildlife, how they're dealing with the noise, how they're dealing with the lighting. I appreciate the fact that it can be used for emergencies if needed. I think that's important. Say if needed. That doesn't it doesn't mean that just because it can be used for emergency, it's going to be used all the time. It's going to be one as needed. I thought they addressed the air quality, and I think as far as the site, as I said, it's surrounded by industrial. I don't know if we need to state those facts in some kind of format that we all agree to, or we can go ahead and vote. But nonetheless, I'm in favor of it, and I can vote just given those facts that I've stated. But I'd like to thank the public for all their input and their patience for sticking with us this whole time, and the job that AbbVie did in their presentation and all the documentation they presented. Certainly has been thorough, and certainly been worthwhile afternoon, even though it's been long. So those are my thoughts. Again, I don't know whether we need to actually come to some agreement or consensus on what the facts are that we're voting on, or we can go ahead and vote.
Good comments, Denny. I echo.
Chairman, may I say one more thing? I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
I also want to comment, I wrote good citizen with 3 exclamation marks in their report or in their submission on page 16, where, when AbbVie Aviation decides to decommission its heliport, that they will return the property back to where it's at, which is really a big deal because there's a lot of businesses that shut down and they just leave it abandoned. And here, it's right here in writing that they will return the property to the agricultural state of origin. So I think that's a big thing as well. Thank you.
You bet. No worries. I concur with several of my other board members. I would be ready to vote tonight as well. I do appreciate the presentation from AbbVie. I think they went above and beyond what most petitioners do provide. I do also appreciate the comments of the residents. I know this is your neighborhood. All of us as board members have gone out there, as Maria stated before too, and we've spent time kind of taking it all in and listening to what you deal with now and what the area is like. So we're familiar with it as well. But I look at the current zoning of the property and what it could be and what it allows for. And I believe this piece of property is probably the best site. As much as I said before, I'd love to see it within Abbott Park there. The comments and the arguments that they made on why it should be placed outside make sense to me now. And I did have concerns over there, but those have been justified. So I'm willing to vote on it as well. I guess I would turn it back to staff to see when we do make that motion, if there is some type of a monitoring or some type of reporting that could take place that would appease what I'm hearing from several board members. And that would make me, I think, feel a little better too, and some of the residents too, to say we do have something to look at and something to quantify that. So I'm going to turn it back over to Krista because I think she had a comment and maybe there's some comments on that as well.
I do. Yeah, so let me make a note about the monitoring because I first wanted to talk. So we've had some other additional questions in the chat. And really, I want to make sure that everybody who has who wanted to make a statement was able to do so. I don't want it to seem that we were trying to exclude anybody at all. To clarify, I checked our records. We did send a notice to the Sanctuary Homeowners Area Association in their Elk Grove Village address. So that was a question. We had another statement that said, please tell the board that we take issue that the geographical area deemed adequate by the county is not, in our neighborhood's opinion, adequate in the circumstances of this time in 2020. And so there's some concerns that I would have from staff about whether or not, because like I said, I want to make sure that everybody who has a chance to comment has been able to provide us comment. So my recommendation would be to continue this to a date certain so that we can allow, maybe some additional time just to collect any additional comments from folks who might want to do so. And then finally, going back to your question about monitoring, so I would put that back on AbbVie. My question to, because that's not something that staff would normally, we do monitor sites, CUPs from time to time. We do routine, inspections maybe on a regular basis or things like that. But given that this is a slightly different situation, my question I would put back to AbbVie is, do they have to keep a record, a flight record? Is that something that IDOT requires them to do? And if so, are they willing to provide those records to county staff so that we can verify that they are in compliance with any conditions?
Yeah, thank you, Krista. This is Russ. Let me go ahead and say that, AbbVie is willing to offer tonight that we would provide the county that self-certification annually to say that we're abiding by the number of operations that we've submitted in our application. That's something that I think is a reasonable compromise to the concerns that were raised, and that we could provide that. I think obviously there is confidentiality into the locations we fly, which we have to protect, the suppliers, the vendors, anybody that we meet with in, there's SEC regulations on who tracks everywhere AbbVie flies. So we can certify to you that we will abide by that, operations limit that is in our application. And we'd encourage obviously a vote tonight.
And again, I would state that we are interested in the number of operations that are occurring on the property specific, not including details about where those flights ultimately end up going to.
Yeah.
And so that, yes, if you're maintaining a record of how many flights are coming in, and you would be able to, and maybe slightly more and then just once a year, but maybe, on a quarterly basis or something, so that we can just monitor how many flights are occurring, how many operations.
We're reasonable to meet your accommodations there.
Perfect. That is appreciated, and that could be made part of the motion tonight too. I think I'm going to say that based on the comments from the board members and based on the comments that we've received tonight, I think I'm going to call for a vote on this tonight, as I do feel we've given adequate time for testimony. We've gone above and beyond what we typically do for a hearing as well. So unless there is any one of the board members that objects to that, I didn't hear that in the comments before. I'm going to go ahead and say we'll call for a vote, and at this time we would close testimony, which we haven't done yet. So if that's okay with everyone, I need a motion to close testimony at this time.
So move to close testimony.
First by Maria, Member Peterson. Second was by
So moved.
Marv, I believe. We'll put for your second. Sounds good. We went around before. Whoever is going to make the motion, I just ask that you incorporate the findings that we heard today as part of that motion. They could be what we used from staff before and anything that we learned today. Also, that motion also includes a quarterly reporting from AbbVie to Lake County on the number of takeoffs and landings that take place from that, as they stated they would do today. So if someone would like to make that motion at this time, it'd be in order.
I'll give it a shot.
Okay, go for it, Denny.
I move the request for development of a heliport presented in case number CUP 00058422020 be approved with the following conditions. 1, prior to any permit issued by staff, the applicant shall demonstrate compliance with all applicable state and federal requirements. 2, the development of the site shall conform to approved site plans and the terms and conditions set forth as part of the conditional use permit. 3, the private use of the heliport shall conform to the operational standards set forth in the application associated with CUP 000584-2020, including but not limited to: A, flight operations are limited to occur from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Fridays, with a total number of operations, takeoffs, and landings not to exceed 24 per week. Emergency service operations exempted. The flight paths shall be limited to those described in Exhibit 1, AbbVie Aviation Heliport Noise and Air Quality Report, prepared by Mead and Hunt Incorporated on October 30th, 2019, unless weather conditions prohibit use of the predetermined path based on pilot's judgment. 4, general lighting of the subject property shall be installed and maintained in accordance to the standards of Section 151168 of the Lake County Code, and all luminaries shall be sheltered to prevent light and glare spillover to any residential properties and abutting rights of way. And 5, AbbVie shall submit quarterly reports as to the number of operations.
Sounds good, Denny. Good job incorporating those. So we do have a first. Is there a second to Member Hockney's motion?
I second.
Second by Member Starkey. Any discussion on the motion or any additions of something that we didn't cover? Seeing none, I will ask for a roll call on the motion as presented.
Member Hockney,
Aye.
Member Starkey,
Aye.
Member Peterson,
Aye.
Member Raymond,
Aye.
Member Roche,
Aye.
Member Rindle is no longer with the meeting, and Chairman Kaplan.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Great, thank you. Before we adjourn, I do once again want to thank AbbVie for the thorough presentation. I also want to give a special thank you to staff. This was brought up to us a long time ago before COVID, that it was coming down the pike. There was a lot of work that was put into this, a lot of detailed work that was added that helped us form our opinion. And they did it in a non-biased way, which I appreciated. So to staff, all of you, kudos to you. And thank you to the residents once again who sat through this almost 4-hour hearing here. We do value your comments. We do appreciate your comments. I know AbbVie wants to be a good neighbor and they will continue to be. And as always, if you have issues, do not hesitate to reach out to the staff. They are there, they are responsive, and we look forward to this moving forward as well. So with that, if there's nothing else from staff, do you have anything else for us? AbbVie?
I don't know.
No, oh, good, great. With that, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
So moved from Peterson, second from Hockney, I believe. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Enjoy your evening. Thank you all very much. We'll see you guys in about a week or so.